If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also have a store at Shop Tees, so if you would like to support us, please feel free to take a look at shop-tees.com/Trish and Sarah. And we are also happy to announce the Social Suplex newsletter, which is published every other week and available at socialsuplex.com and contains insane amounts of news from dozens of promotions across the world, as well as features, reviews, you name it. And we have there's a new newsletter out this week, so please take a look. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. I have been looking at some previews, so I may be a little bit biased that way. It is Monday, July 21st, 2025. And Trish, we went to All In.
We did.
We went to All In. I saw you like a week ago, not even 10 days, like 8 days ago. I saw you in the flesh. I hugged you aggressively too many times. Made you very uncomfortable.
I think producer Leah might have mauled me at one point.
Yes. And our friend Emmy definitely mauled you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I got that was just like a flurry of tassels and hat, just out of nowhere into a choke, because I didn't see it coming. So fair play. Yeah. Tap just like that. Yeah. Just like that.
So yes, Trish and myself, the ladies from Tunnel Talk, Rich and James from One Nation Radio, Jeremy and Josh from Keeping It Strong Style, the Social Suplex Network headed to Arlington, Texas to take in All In, and we had an absolutely spectacular weekend. We got to hang out with people, we got to meet people, we got to see the show in person. It was a pretty amazing experience overall. I loved it. I think I'm not going to speak for you, Trish.
It would be funny if I went, I hated it now.
All the other motherfuckers suck.
Yeah. No.
Rich specifically, asshole. No, I'm just kidding.
What shot is he giving you that you want me to pay back for there?
No, I shouldn't even. He's too sweet.
He is so sweet. Just fantastic experience. And I think, I talked a lot back in January about the experience around the Tokyo Dome and about how that was with everybody kind of getting together and having fun and kind of just sharing the experience of being at such a big thing, and very much felt the same here. And it was just it was awesome to meet so many of you guys as well, and to say hello. And I'm really rubbish at communicating, so I apologize in real life. So I apologize if I got lost in the moment anytime, because I'm sure I did. Awesome. It was awesome.
I am not rubbish at communicating.
No,
in fact, I perhaps would argue that I over-communicate. So if I talked your ear off, I apologize. I'm very sorry about that. But it really was wonderful to meet so many people in person. And in some cases, didn't even feel like meeting people because you've talked to them so much, it feels like you've known them for a long time. But it was just an amazing experience. It was amazing to talk to people who've listened to the podcast and, have been fans of ours for a while. That was, I can't say that with a straight face.
No, don't say that.
I'm uncomfortable now. People have listened to the podcast, period. They don't like or dislike us, whatever, it's fine. But yeah, we just had an absolutely spectacular time, and the show in person was a really amazing experience. Like the highs and the lows. I think I thought it was a great production. I thought the show itself was spectacular. The way that the stadium looked was great. I thought the way they set up the stage in the arena was extremely cool. We had spectacular. We did not sit together. This was the only negative thing about the weekend was that I sat with the Tunnel Talk gals and Trish was in a different location, which was very upsetting to me halfway through the main event. I was like, why aren't you next to me? Probably for a smart reason, because you would have been mauled again.
No, it was interesting. So, yeah, I like to feel the noise and kind of watch the kind of audience from above. It's just a thing I have. And it was interesting, actually, because I think it gives us probably different perspectives on certain things.
Yes.
Which will be good for this. But, yeah. So when did I make that decision? Early June? Might give you an idea.
Yeah, it was... Yes, we had planned to go to All In for like a while, although I will agree with producer Leah that we did at times waver briefly in our decisions during some of our darker moments. I was like, do I want to go to Texas for this? But I'm glad that I did, because it was an amazing show. And I think you knew when you came to visit in June that you were going. Because I said,
yes.
Because I said I'll see you. Yeah. It was the first time I'd seen you that I knew when I was going to see you again, which was extremely weird, but also very, very pleasant.
Yeah, I knew that, and I knew where the main was going. I don't think
the Owen had happened by that point.
Yeah, and I knew. I've said it through my Discord now. I've tried to tell you, like, very, very quietly, like, shut the fuck up. And thanks, Doc, for the apology, but I did try and tell you.
Yes, we did know what was going to happen at the main event.
But it was, but that doesn't change for me, like, any of the enjoyment of it. And I got really swept up in the build for these shows as well. And, the ballpark setting is really, really spectacular. It's so much better than in a football stadium.
Yes.
The viewpoint, the way the noise moves is better. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, and we'll talk about that after, but just in general, like the way that it feels more kind of close, but you still have that visual of the huge amount of people. You don't see the big gaps, like the big red seats that you saw at Wembley all last year on screen. There was none of that really. So it just looks like this huge volume of people. But as for someone going to one of these shows, it's much, much better to attend in a ballpark, and you feel so much closer to it. And they used the big screens and everything. I think they use them really, really well.
Yes.
And that made it feel much bigger, which I think at Wembley is difficult. I know they did the big stage last year, but I think that was something the first year where they had the big crowd, but they didn't really have like the big feel. And that's something that you can just make really easy in a ballpark. Same way that New Japan do with the Tokyo Dome as well.
Yeah, we were straight back from the ramp, so I could see the big screen, like head straight on. And I thought that they really used it amazingly for the entrances. I felt like the entrances on that level worked really well. Like, I appreciate that I wasn't able to get a close-up view of people's faces as they were coming out, but there were definitely entrances, like Ospreay's entrance especially, like you felt like you were sort of about to walk through you'll know the words for this, the Japanese temple stuff. Being terrible. The archways. We're blanking on it. We'll get back to it in a second. But you felt like you were going to walk through those with Toni, the way that they had the setup.
You mean the gates?
Thank you. Yes.
Right, okay. The karma gate, yeah.
I thought that the Toni, like the giant screen for her, like it was the outside of the movie theater, was incredible. Swerves was like you were the way that he had it, I think it might have been his regular Tron, but the way that they had it so large, you felt like you were flying through all these different important things that had happened to Swerve, like that you were a part of that. And like I thought the stuff for Hangman, the way that they used the big screen in the back for the sunset, and then they had the smaller stuff that they were showing you on TV up above, meant that it was like you were with Hangman while he was walking around in the field, which I thought was really, really cool. The Kenny Omega entrance was also extremely overwhelming. I don't know that I liked that one as much. I kind of halfway through it was like, all right. But I got the overall picture of it, and it did feel like he was being presented in this incredible way. That, it was funny the people that they chose to do those big entrances for versus the people that they didn't. Like Okada just came out like a normal dude.
Okada can do that though. He's done that at Tokyo Domes where he's had the big entrance, but he's also just kind of walked out with the Rainmaker theme and down the ramp. But I guess the big thing was the difference in his his wear, because it's normally very much kind of very sparkly, very exuberant, and they've kind of taken that away. Is another thing they've taken, as well as taking the theme away this week of trying to kind of get him booed. But yeah, so the Kenny one. I may feel a bit different at Kenny one. The big thing I noticed is that you could see the fire going around like the boards on the ballpark before like he even came out. So they did this thing where the fire goes all the way around, and then they did the entrance, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm not against that song in that environment. I don't think it works on normal TV. I think it works much better in these sort of things. And maybe this just is because I'm a Final Fantasy mark, right? That probably helps too, that these games are like my cup of tea, right? I'm huge on them. But it's like, so then when they did like the lighting up of like the Omega symbol and that sort of thing, and he comes through it, and then you've got like the bit on the ramp where he's doing, they did a close up on TV, it's like he does like the cockiness kind of thing that he does at the Dome, and I was like, oh, we're getting that, Kenny. And then, it hits into the melody part of the theme, and you pick up, and he's like rousing the crowd. I thought, no, I quite like it. So I'm probably the high person on that theme. But I liked the image of the fire. With the Swerve one though, I thought there was a couple of really interesting things with that one. So they did the Ain't Nobody entrance.
Yes.
Which was his indie theme for anyone that's not aware of that, I think. And they used Jojo Offerman, who I think Rich said on One Nation Radio is going to be on Swerve's next album.
Yes.
So, but it was really cool because they had like the fireflies in the background for her.
That was really cool.
And that was really cool. And if anyone remembers, like it's not the first attachment that Swerve's had to like the Bray Wyatt character either, because he wore the Bray Wyatt gear for the Texas Death Match against Hangman in 2023. That was, the gear was all Bray Wyatt themed. So, if you're into that sort of stuff and the little details, it kind of picked up really nicely. And then with Ain't Nobody, I think will work, but it needs to be again in London. Right, it will work really well in London because that song I think is bigger here than it was in parts of the US, and you could tell that like a lot of people didn't know it, but I thought it was really, really cool.
Some of its age too, I will say. I knew right away what song it was. Leah was like, "I've never heard this song before." I was like, "I have heard the song." I'm singing along to it.
I think the UK is kind of obsessed with the 80s and 90s still, even at a young age. We just had these Oasis gigs here in Manchester.
That's true.
It's full of like teenagers just as much as it's full of like 40, 50-year-olds. So I think, that would work much better here. So bring that back next year for whatever he's doing. And then, the Osprey one with the ninjas and the game thing, it looked pretty cool from up top. And the only thing with that one is this is such a stupid complaint. It's not really a complaint, but just take the pyro off like the chants bits at the end, because I think you lost the impact of how loud the crowd was. Yeah. By doing like the big pyro at the top. So I would have totally taken that off. And then the Page one. So the Page one was really interesting because he used like the whistler Molly Lewis, who's Australian. For that, and I like the kind of subtleness because it kind of fits him, right? And it's a fistful of dollars, which he's always had good, bad, and ugly kind of stuff imprinted in all his stuff. Ecstasy of Gold, I think, is on his plates, aren't they, on the belt?
Yes.
And he's had stuff from that on his playlists and everything like that. So anyone kind of gets an idea of that. But I kind of like how it was kind of that subtle, that quietness. It was just him out in the field, and then he goes to the horse. And I think I believe Sean Ross Sapp reported they were going to potentially looked at doing a horse thing, and I know there was horses carriages seen outside the arena on the Friday, so that had kind of increased the speculation. But I like the fact that he goes to the stable and it's the whole get back on thing and his kind of thing, and then it goes into like the horse coming across the stage. So, and it was just him coming out, out the babyface tunnel with the spin on the camera, which was very clever.
Yes, and
everyone could see that in the in there as well. And just the subtleness, and it's just this guy, and it's this guy that we're all kind of behind. But I like the fact that they went with so much exuberance and they kind of had the big entrances, because they're so important. I know it's like this thing where you think everything that should matters is what happens in the ring, but in terms of making someone feel bigger, and I hate the phrase larger than life, but essentially it's true. Like, you have to have all these things, and I think the way that they presented a lot of their major characters from Toni, Mercedes, with the dancers from the Texas Rangers with the all the belts they had all on the individual belts.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. It just made everything bigger. To the Bucks with their stupid boat.
I loved that boat.
And
the boat, the fact that they took a boat and put it on a scissor lift and then just drove the scissor lift out really slowly and lifted up the boat, lifted it down again. I just fucking loved that. I'm like, yeah, that's what you should be doing with a scissor lift. Why would you put a boat on top of it? That's fucking amazing. It was great. It was great.
The fucking funny thing about that was at first I thought, are they not going to have a stupid entrance? Like, don't let me down here. Where's your stupid fucking entrance? Right? Because they just come out and they did their poses and I thought, nah, they've got to have something stupid. And then when I saw them walk across, I was like, they've got the fucking boat. I can't believe they've got the fucking boat. Apparently they've had that one in the works for a few months now. And then they did like the address thing, and I think John Pollock picked up on it. It's kind
very
of
smart of John Pollock, yes.
Yeah, picked up on it. It's kind of very much a talking about competition and how they're succeeding in spite of it. Very much feels like a shot at the current WWE kind of programming stuff, which was a very good pickup. But yeah, and then do you know they were supposed to have cannons as well? That would have been funny, wouldn't it?
Yes, I would have enjoyed the cannons.
So, confetti money, and I think that might be the reason, there was no confetti on the show at all.
Yeah.
So maybe there was a malfunction there, because we didn't even have confetti in the main event, which I actually thought ended up making things slightly better, actually. It was just him and all the weapons and the belt. But no, they really did a good job of that sort of thing, of just making things feel bigger.
My only complaint is, if you're going to have folks like JoJo Offerman, if you're going to have folks like the Whistler Molly, put the people's names on the fucking TV broadcast when you do this. Like, I don't see why you couldn't advertise who was out there. Like, tell us who these performers are. Like, they deserve to have their names put on the screen when they're performing. That's if that's my only quibble, it's a quibble. But like, I think you should be giving those folks credit. But that's my one comment. Yeah,
because they all added to things in a really cool way. And I think they came across well the performances on screen as well.
Yeah.
Where I don't think everything noise-wise did come across as well on screen. And I know it's a cliche to say, oh, it's louder in the stadium and all that stuff. But there are huge bits of it. I mean, I watch it back, and there's huge bits of it where it's just the differentiation is massive. I think the sequence in the Swerve Ospreay Bucks match with where it starts with the Buckshot and it ends with the house call and the hidden blade.
Yep.
That sequence is nowhere near as loud.
No.
And there's a bit in the Omega match I keep thinking of, like before we get to the Terminator dive, where the crowd are breaking into the Terminator dive.
Yes.
And you can't even hear that. Like, this is not even when we get to the Terminator dive sequence, which you can barely hear, but you can hear some of it. But you can't hear the actual bit in the crowd where they're breaking into that as like a chant for Kenny.
Which they did spontaneously. He didn't have to call for it. People were doing it before he did it.
Yeah, so they, like, even a quarter way into the match, before they even get to dud, they're doing that thing. But I think this is a case of sometimes when it comes to these big arenas, and we find this a lot in sports as well. So the easiest things to kind of translate onto the screen are like the ones where the chants are very kind of sharp, like abrupt. That's why something like the Yes chant works so well, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like simple, it has the noise, and it's just a structure, it's like rhythm. Or something like the extended noise. So there's the chant when they do the Toni Storm chant, they do the Toni Storm. Yeah, because it has that extended bit on it. It kind of gets picked up better in the microphones and stuff, whereas other stuff just kind of comes up and gets lost. And you get chants that kind of start in the lower tiers and then kind of get lost as they come up, or they can't make it out. Sometimes when we have like a sports team that go to Wembley for the first time, and it's really hard to actually learn how to kind of chant to make like consecutive noise in those sort of venues. And it's maybe that sometimes comes with experience, and the more kind of big stadium shows that people go to and do, that will kind of change. But that's something that we always find is that when you get them clubs that don't go very often, you don't get that wall of noise for actual chanting in the same way that you would, for someone that's been 10, 15 times and they just know what works and what doesn't. And that's something I always think about. And there was the same kind of thing here, that there's a lot of times where you can hear like the buzz of the noise.
Yeah.
And you can hear you can hear it on like the spots, right? You can hear it on the spots in terms of some of the kick-outs, or you can hear it on... The one that kind of plays in my mind is the Paige stabbing Moxley in the head with a fork.
Yes.
And you can hear the noise come up. Same with like the Triple Storm Zeros in the Toni Storm and Mercedes match. But you don't kind of get the crowd kind of chanting in the same way that you would in an arena. It's just the way it is. That's just kind of one of those things that you have to kind of mix in, and it's difficult to kind of rectify in those environments. And it might mean that there's a bigger differentiation between being in an arena and on TV or being in a stadium and on TV. And I think that's what kind of happens there when I listen back to it.
Well, let's talk about the crowd and the crowd feeling in terms of being there and watching it back, which we both did later. I sent you a message halfway through the show, and I said it's really, really clear who the crowd cares about and who the crowd does not care about. And that was my main takeaway from this. There are some things in AEW that are working really well and that the audience is really into. And there's some stuff in AEW that the audience does not give a fuck about, right? And I kind of felt like, it doesn't mean that those things are bad or that they should be abandoned or anything like that, but it was just, I never got the impression in the audience that the audience was at any time bored necessarily. My feeling more when it came to like parts where the crowd was quiet was sort of, it's like, okay, I'm not going to waste my time on this because I know I have a lot to come, right? Once they opened with Samoa Joe or the Ops versus the Death Riders, you kind of knew, okay, we're going to a triple main event, right? These things are going to be at the end. I got to save my energy for the show. And I also think it was just, anticipatory waiting for that stuff and just like, I'm not going to sit around and try to, see what's going to happen with these guys. I never felt like the crowd was completely checked out. I felt like there were times where the crowd was like, I got to go do some shit, like I'm going to go to the bathroom. And it just was, and the same was true in the gauntlets too. In the gauntlet, especially the men's gauntlet, it was really clear who the audience cared about and who they did not care about, especially because that thing went on so long.
It's one of those things where there's an element to it. So I think part of it is the show structure. So I think there's a lot of AEW fans that have got very used to the open being like really hot, like a big match, something going for 5 or whatever, and then the crowd and everything lists from there, and then you get kind of a low in the middle and then pick up. Whereas this, they went completely different. They went much more of what you'd expect from a stadium show in general over the years, in that you open with something that's going to, start relatively strong, but you're not looking at your 4s or your 5s or that sort of thing. And on this occasion, they went for something where they wanted to put as much doubt as possible into the main event, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got a main event where the way that you've built it is almost like the babyface has tricked the heel into this match where the babyface has an advantage. So therefore, you have to take the advantage away that the babyface has managed to build in the build, and that's what they did in the opening one. So much so that actually, like about 3 matches in, I completely forgot that the Ops had won that match, because I was just left with I was like, oh, we've just had like heel, because I'm just like, because I'm losing like the plot that in terms of like, oh, they might have won the match, but then we took Samoa Joe out. But I'm not against that. So, there's times where they do the kind of fast start, and I find it kind of exhausting to because then you don't get the build to the end of the card. So it just kind of feels like you're holding on for the rest of the show sometimes, rather than having that pick up towards the end. I'm much more in favour sometimes of having like a, 3.5, 4-star open, like a strong open, but not something that overawes the rest of the card. I know that's different for different people, but I don't think there was any point of the show where you had like a Jay White, Okada, Wrestle Kingdom main event syndrome of pure silence. But I think you're right. And some of it was imposed by the people that are in there. So, for example, the men's casino gauntlet in particular, it was clear that there were a lot of people that people weren't invested in. And I think it highlighted a lack of the kind of mid-card stories. So, and especially compared to the women's one, where I think you had a lot of mid-card stories and lower mid-card stories that played out, that got responses from the crowd, starting from when they did the Willow Chris Statlander stuff at the start, and then when they did the Fekler and Queen Aminata, and then they did the Thunder Rosa Athena stuff, and then they had Surium with like people she wrestled in Japan, she was in, and elsewhere, so she's in with Mina Shirakawa, she's in with Alex Windsor, she faced Eve last month. So they did all these kind of, and then Penelope Ford and Megan Bayne and the stuff with
Sky Blue and Julia Hart.
And and then they did the Anna Jay, Ty Mello stuff, and had Harley Cameron pop up.
Yep.
So they had so much depth in theirs because they had some of these undercurrent programs, and the men's felt like it was really devoid of that. Like there wasn't too much kind of going on. I know they did a bit with like Ricochet and Juice Robinson returning and that sort of thing, and I think they tried to have like the impetus being that the Don Callis family were controlling this until like MJF was kind of advantageous to get the win. But it just never felt like that. It felt like it was completely lost in the middle, and you just had these long gaps of kind of people not caring, and it went on and on and on. So the structure of that one was probably not quite there.
I don't know.
That's why it lost the interest for me.
I think part of the problem with some of that, I don't want to say, but Daniel Garcia is clearly supposed to be, and who knows if Sammy or Dustin, I don't think Sammy or Dustin were supposed to be in it, but there was clearly some changes made to it last minute because of the Adam Cole stuff. But that said, it's one person. It's not that big of a deal. They should have been able to cover for it. And there was a section after Mortos came in that just went on forever. And just, like you said, there was really no storyline stuff in there. It did seem like they were building to a couple things, but it just, a lot of that stuff's hard to track when you're in a match that's taken 37 minutes. It just went on for a very long time.
It's not the type of match where you can do that without like big surprises or that sort of thing. And there was no impetus. So the way that the structure was different from the men's to the women's matches is that in the women's matches, there was always an impetus to win the match, right? So even when you have, towards the end, you have like Chris Stanlander throwing... I think it was Megan Bain, onto everyone on the outside. And then the only people that weren't involved in that were straight back into the ring to carry on because you want to win the match. Whereas in the men's match, there was a lot of people kind of laid out on ringside just watching.
It was a lot of one-on-one and two-on-two.
Yeah,
smaller
there was
groups.
but you could see them. You're not just seeing people down because they've been hurt, which is the idea. The only reason that you shouldn't be competing is, you've been taken out, and instead they're all just kind of watching. There's no impetus to kind of win the match, and I think you feel that really differently. I've got to admit that I think a lot of the crowd were watching Darby Allin's team climb the rafters. During that match. I think they found that the most interesting thing. But it's, you could tell in that match. The match that followed is difficult. I find it really difficult to kind of judge it because you have the Adam Cole announcement. Yeah. And that was such an emotional moment. That's another thing that didn't really come through on the screen with the amount of response as well. And it's like...
It was really shocking. It was just really unexpectedly shocking, where all of a sudden he's out there saying, I'm not going to commit to retiring right this second. And you're like, holy fuck! Like, what the hell happened?
You're wondering what's going on, and you've got to remember that a lot of people weren't aware in the stadium of what, like, that match had even been changed. You don't see all the stuff on the pre-show either. So the first time that a lot of people were aware that match had been changed to a 4-way was when that graphic flew up just before the match. Yeah. So you then have this shock of what's going on. Then he comes out, and you can see immediately, like, on his face, like, something's going on. And then the way he spoke, I think, petrified people.
Yeah.
And then the way that, he's embraced with the Paragon, and, Garcia looked very emotional on the ramp as he comes out as well. And it just knocks the crowd. It's one of those things, because at the end of the day, wrestling's wrestling, but what happens to these people as human beings is always going to, emotionally, and it should, hit people far harder sometimes, than what's going on in this wrestling ring.
Yep.
And the people that followed weren't exactly ones that everyone was really heavily invested with. And you're going to get that. That's the response you're going to get. And, credit to them. They tried so hard. There was, like, Spanish Fly to the outside with, like, Garcia. Was it Garcia and Guevara? Yeah.
Yes.
And then they had the sequence with the superplexes as well. And they were trying desperately. And they couldn't get that. And it's okay. It's going to happen. Did the match go too long? Yes.
Yes.
But you're also, and then you try and do the feel-good moment with Dustin, and I think they had to do that because I think when you listen to the commentary, they allied the injury with Cole to Carl Fletcher. Yep. So I don't think you cannot put Fletcher in that position to win then. You can have him win in a few weeks and you can play off that, whatever you want to do. But at that point, it was clear you're going to have to put a babyface over. And so they did. But matches like that, I just think that kind of lives in a vacuum. There's nothing you can do with it. Maybe you take it off the show, maybe you don't, I don't know, but there's just nothing you can do with it. And at that point, once you do the Cole announcement, you do need something that the crowd are just going to have to live with, and everyone just kind of has the time to overcome. And it moved into the first part of the box match with Swerve and Ospreay. Yes. It's like you had that kind of emotion still. As much as everyone kind of enjoyed the entrances, and I thought the kind of comedic style of the Bucks actually kind of helped in that regard. But it was like, you still have to pick the crowd back up, and that's where they're really good at doing that.
Yeah. I thought that the 4-way, I think at the time I was like, what the hell with the Dustin win? But in retrospect, after thinking about it, I'm like, okay, this was a smart choice. Kyle Fletcher is going to get way more heat beating Dustin Rhodes to shit and then taking the belt from him than he would in this match, not against Cole. And I agree that it's kind of a tough spot because it's not necessarily fair to these guys that have been put in the position. It's not fair to Fletcher to take the match away from him necessarily. And I think adding Sammy and Dustin gave them a little bit of something. And I kind of couldn't blame the audience for not again, the shock of the Cole stuff, plus you have people who are not necessarily, I think the audience was really into Fletcher. Like, I got the impression from the show that they liked him a lot. But, Garcia's been in a weird spot lately, and Dustin and Sammy haven't been on AEW TV, really. So, it kind of was what it needed to be, but I really think it could. That's one of the few matches where I'm like, it could have gone a lot shorter. They really could have gotten in and out in 10 minutes.
Yeah, possibly. I just think they wanted the time to kind of get the crowd around. And, the way that they built it was that you would have the breaks for the crowd as well.
Yep.
And you need that sometimes. They are long shows. And this one was incredibly long. I mean, they said that this song was longer than WrestleMania 35. And I was at WrestleMania 35, and I think that felt a lot longer because it didn't have the peak in the middle, and it didn't have the peak at the end. It had the final match. Yeah, people were happy with the result. They wanted to see Becky Lynch win. But that one was very much a bookend show. So you had the Seth basically just squashing Brock Lesnar at the very beginning, and then kind of very, very little in the middle, and then the kind of triumph moment on the end in a relatively good match. But at that point, people were shattered. And I think it makes a huge difference when you do that at 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
Than when you do that at 7 p.m. at night. Because
yes, I could not have gotten through this show at 7 o'clock at night. There was no way on earth that I would have been able to. I really enjoyed this. The length didn't. It was a long show, but I didn't leave it thinking, oh my God, I'm absolutely destroyed. I left it feeling like on a high, and I feel like the time of day was a big part of that.
I think it's a huge difference maker, and I think it's something they should look at in future. And it was the same what we said at Wrestle Dynasty. Like, the reason I think we enjoyed that day more as a day, as a fan, as experience, was having that show in the middle of the day. That was a 1 p.m. start. And then having the evening to just kind of hang out and do things and just enjoy, enjoying this stuff together. And I think this was very, very much similar, that you had that. And you didn't go into it thinking, I've done 20 things today, or we've been waiting around for hours for this thing. And that makes just such a huge difference in the layout and how that feels. So it can be longer than that show, but it feels better. And the way that they hit the middle bit, the Swerve Ospreay Bucks match needed to be where it was.
Yes.
And they are very good at going in positions where no one else wants to go. You think about, they did the match with Kenny and Jericho, which was Full Gear right after Swerve and Hangman's Texas Death match.
Yep.
And they've done it many times. You've seen them, like, if you want to count on a position of them going in a position where you need to lift the crowd up, you just generally go, the Bucks will do it. They'll raise their hand and be like, okay, we'll take that spot. And that's exactly what they did, alongside Swerve and Ospreay, who have always got that ability to do that as well. And the way they laid that match out was really, really clever. We said we weren't going to go match by match, and we're kind of doing it now, so...
Well, we're talking about the crowd sense.
Yeah, we're bringing stuff in and out here too. Yeah. But the clever thing about that match was that they played into it early, so they knew that they needed to build that match to kind of get the crowd back with them. So you have the early bits of the control period where you've got the Bucks kind of, we're the tag team, we're the ones, that's why we're able to control, we're able to work together, these guys aren't. Yep. And then you build that into wanting to see the babyface fight back. So they do the bits with Ospreay, where he's kind of defiant, and he does stuff with Swerve that's defiant. And then you get to the point where they do that huge sequence, which starts with like, it's funny actually, because I watched it back and I didn't realise that Matt Jackson starts on the outside doing the thing like Hangman does in his little kind of, when he's ever in a hot tag routine. Then he goes straight into the Buck shot, and I was like, you motherfucker. But yeah, and then they go into that sequence there with all the super kicks and everything else and all the counters, and then straight into the end with the house call and the hidden blade. And you're like, okay, one, they've got the crowd, because the crowd is right up now. And you cannot tell this so much on screen, but that's the first time in that entire night where that crowd is going absolutely fucking apeshit. Like, they're losing their mind.
Yes.
From the front to the very, very top.
Yes.
Right? That's the first moment. And they're going absolutely apeshit. And then they've got them. And then you can work on the counter stuff. You can work on the stuff, when you get the emotional moments like Swerve, the payoff with Swerve protecting Ospreay. From taking the super kicks, paying back to what they did after the match that they did in Portland. And then you can play back on other things, and you can do all the big spots and that, because you've then got the crowd with you. So you have to do all that kind of work in the beginning to kind of get them to the point where they want to support the baby faces enough that they're going to get over all the kind of the feeling that they had previously and into this one and be fully invested in this. And I think they did such a great, great job on that. And then you get to all the way build up to that one, to the finish. And then, they did the thing where they had Ospreay and Swerve win. So the stipulation, I think the weight of the stipulation really helped the match too, because people were invested in the outcome. because they could see it going the other way.
Well, I think this was one of those ones where you couldn't predict it. Like, there were matches I just could not predict. I was really confident early on that Toni was winning, and then Athena won the gauntlet, and I was like, oh shit, like, maybe Toni isn't winning this.
Yeah, that was
like,
a given. I thought it was the other way. As soon as Athena won, I was like, oh, Mercedes is not winning.
I was like, that one was a different one for me. Like, this one, I wasn't sure which way they were going to go. I was like, they could do either one of these. And I thought, I really liked the structure of the match. I really liked the story of it. I liked the fact, like you said, that they started out with the Bucks being like, we're the tag team. You're not a tag team. They played up a lot of that, like, are they on the same page stuff, but not in like an obnoxious, like, I hate you way, more in like, like, we haven't really been, like, you know, Ospreay made this thing. The whole... like, Tunnel Talk has been on this, but the whole story of this relationship between the two of them is Ospreay being like, we're best friends, and Swerve being like, I know who he is. Like, I've seen him in the hallway before. I just, and that, I felt like that was in the match, too. Like, you really did get to that point where Swerve was like, no, we are friends. And that was just like, he was the one protecting Ospreay. He was the one going and hugging Ospreay at the end. Like,
yeah, it was cute. That was cute.
It was really cute. I just thought that they did a really good job with that. And I thought the Bucks being like super confident and then not being confident and then those guys just not being able to kick out. And, you know, Nick Jackson looked like a super villain in the best way possible. They just, I don't know, it was a great match. They structured it really well and I really enjoyed it. And like you said, it got the crowd really invested for the first time, that like continuously invested for the first time during the show. I felt like there'd been other big moments and big pops from the crowd, but nothing as insane throughout as the actual match made people.
It was the right match in the right place.
Yeah.
Completely the right match in the right place.
Yeah.
Great ending. You know, you had the bit of Swerve overcoming the Bucks, taking back to that story. So you go all the way, you know, you close that narrative and then you can go from there. And then it was just completely in the right place. And I think they followed it up well with the women's gauntlet as well, which was much better structured than the men's. Yeah. And then they gave everybody the break of the triple tag team match, you know?
This was another one that the crowd... didn't
give a shit
fuck about. And it occurred to me while I also sort of mentally checked out a little bit during this. Like, I was in the crowd, and like listening and engaging with the crowd enjoying the match or not enjoying it. But I can't say that I was super hyper focused on the action in the ring. The stuff watching it back that I found fascinating is that, like, you know, heat is a good thing, but at some point the baby faces have to make a comeback, and they never fucking did. It was just the Hurt Syndicate heating, and people like chanting "they hurt people."
Well, not that many people did.
Not that many people, but the actual in-ring action was not, like, the crowd just didn't respond to it. MJF was going nuts trying to get people engaged.
He worked so hard bashing on it. He probably worked harder in trying to get interest in the crowd for that one than he did in his actual match. Right. Honest.
The crowd just wasn't invested, and like all of the people in the match, I mean, Speedball was going crazy, Kevin Knight was going crazy, but at no point did there ever, I don't know, they're not engaging with this at all. Like, it's I don't know. And I'm not like, when I say this and we talk about this, like, I don't want to be like, oh my God, they were deadly silent the entire time, or they were screaming their heads off the entire time, or blah, blah. Like, I'm sure there were periods of time in the match, somebody will be like, oh, look, they cheered here. Like, sure. But like, the overall impression I had, and wasn't something I changed my mind on when I watched the show back, was that this is not working, I guess was kind of how I felt.
Yeah. And, you know, there was no selling of anything that happened on Wednesday. Nope. With the huge beat down. You do the huge beat down, and it was like, it doesn't exist. And then we went back to exactly where we were. And, you know, when you watch it back on TV, I think some of the worst bits as well is the commentary is fucking awful.
The commentary is awful.
There's too many people involved in commentary. There's too many people on the outside.
They're trying to pop each other. They're trying to get their jokes off. They're not actually, like, fucking paying attention to what's going on in the ring. It was just bad.
It just feels bad. Like, the whole mood of that match is just completely different from the two that came before it. And just there's nothing about it that kind of redeems it for me. And then you get to the finish and they do the thing with, you know, FTR being pushed off by Lashley, and then they come up onto the apron, and then, you know, Christian gets tossed into them, and then after the unpretty attempts, loses the match to the spear. Fine, okay. Right, so we wanted to know why FTR were out there. So they talked about, they'll be number one contenders. We'll see if that holds. And then just to get them out there. And then it was like, okay, Christian's been forced into his match. We all expected the Copeland return, right?
Yeah,
I think
of
everybody
course.
in the building expects to go return, especially because they couldn't do it last year. They want everybody singing the Alter Bridge song in the stadium, and I can't slate Alter Bridge because I spent too much of my life with those boys to do so. But you knew what was coming. But the funniest thing was, this was the most WWE-like thing on this entire fucking show, right? And I'm going to talk about the end about how this felt like an AEW show for the first time, but this did not. Right?
Nope.
So you've had this WWE style thing where the cool heels are beating everyone down, they're all fucking geeks. And then you get this finish where the idea is Nick Wayne turns on Christian. One, it's weird that he turns on Christian and he's the fucking heel, right?
Yeah.
Because he's the one that's being kind of treated like shit for the past year. But no, he's the heel. Okay, fine, whatever. So he puts him up to, tries to, into place for the concerto. And then Copeland's music's going to hit. Everyone, even up in the fucking rafters, knew Copeland's music was going to hit. And then when it does, and then what does he do? He does the full Penta Jeff Hardy fucking shit and starts running down the far end of the ramp. And then he runs back. And then he does his stops for all the fucking pyro, like, yay, pyro!
He does the same fucking entrance he always fucking does.
Yeah,
right?
and Nick Wayne's got the fucking chair right above his head for like all that fucking long, looking like a fucking idiot. And then eventually they're like, "Oh, I can't stand here." So that him and Kip go outside the ring. So Nick's turn that they've been building to for like the whole summer, that apparently delayed the FTR Copeland and Christian match, meant fuck all.
Right.
Because it all came about, and it's all about now, it's all about Adam Copeland, right? Which is always the same thing. It's World's End fucking all over again.
Yep.
Right? And then he gets down the ring and he clears them out, and he barely touches FTR, and he tries to cover this up on Wednesday by, I really wanted to get my hands on FTR. I was like, well, you had a fucking pre-show match, you could have done that, but no, we need this spot. Okay, fine. And then he goes up to Christian, and in the most corny fucking way, he goes, "Go find yourself.
Go find yourself."
You could hear groans. Like, honestly, you could, like, some people wanted to cheer and you could hear that. But, like, you listen to that noise when he comes out, you listen to the noise to this line, a lot of people are just like, oh, for fuck's sake. Because we thought we moved on from this, right? We thought we moved on from this level of kind of fucking one-line bullshit. Like, we just had that sit-down with Swerve and Hangman on Collision on a Thursday. And the depth that goes to, and the depth of storytelling you see in the main event. And then you oppose it with, what the fuck is this?
I listen, I'm not going to lie to you. The audience went nuts for this, right? The audience went nuts for it. His music played that they think you know him shit, and the audience went berserk. They were crazy.
They do all the fucking time for him.
But I'm going to be
completely...
No, it doesn't. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. My impression afterwards was like, how are you not embarrassed? Like, how are you not embarrassed? You fucked off for a bunch of months. You've decided you want to come back in this moment. Like you said, we're going to take Nick Wayne's heel turn. It's going to mean nothing. You're going to humiliate...
a fucking heel turn in the first place.
Right, which should be. You're going to humiliate everyone in the ring. You're going to come out with more pyro than pretty much anyone got. Like, I swear to God, he had the most pyro of any entrance in the fucking thing. Just so he could come out and give one line. Like, how are you not embarrassed by this? Like, what have you done to earn this? You've done jack and shit to get this. Why? Like, why? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, very funny. People were crazy for it. The audience was nuts for it. Like I said, I think I'm not looking forward to this. They want to fuck these guys, fucking stick these guys on Collision. Go ahead.
Yeah, go.
Do your, like, fucking, a nostalgia tag run where you fucking look like shit in front of other people who actually can wrestle. And if FTR want to do this instead of having to fuck around with the Hurt Syndicate, go right ahead. Like, I get it.
I can't blame them on that one.
No, I can't blame on that one either. But this just, like I said, I don't know how you're not embarrassed by this. Like, I would have had a hard time making eye contact with some of the fucking people in the back after that, but whatever.
We had such a great time afterwards as well, just imitating that shit.
Oh my God.
I'll tell you that bit. But no, it was just, very... So if you want the WWE like kind of thing, that was the one on this show. But yeah, the match also made a nice little buffer into the triple main event.
The triple main event. All right. Well, before we go into the triple main event, because I feel like that's like the ultimate essence of the show.
Sure.
Would you have cut anything from the show? We talked about it from his live event experience. There was a lot of talk. There was a lot of chatter after the show was over about how long it was. There were certain podcasters that just could not get past the length of the show to give you any kind of review of it. Did you feel like you would have cut anything from it other than maybe a couple of things that I think for personal preference, or did you feel like from a length perspective you were fine with it?
Like, as in the crowd, and you have to bear in mind that I've done, I'm lucky enough to have done so many of these in different companies. So maybe my perspective is different. I had no issue. because of the way they structured it, because it built to the middle part, and then you had the big kind of middle section with the Swerve Ospreay box tag, and then in the women's gauntlet, and then you had the lull before the 3 main events. And if you are going to go back to back and do your 3 big matches, then you need to build the card up. Maybe, I know people talked about Wrestle Kingdoms and stuff, but the thing about Wrestle Kingdoms is actually they're not quite as long as you think they are, because you have a lot of the kind of tags at the start sort of thing. Yeah. And then also what you will find in terms of the Japanese audience and how much they're into it, especially on the afternoon shows, is not everybody comes in at the start of the show. And we noticed this very much for Dynasty. It was explained to us as well that a lot of people, especially because of work and that thing in Japan, will come in later and it's kind of more like a boxing feel where they start to come in for the main events. And with this crowd, I think the biggest thing that for Tony Khan, where he could argue that it worked, is as soon as we got to Tony Storm and Mercedes, that crowd was up. That crowd wanted these matches. It was waiting for these matches. Yes. It had been given the opportunity to wait for these matches as well, rather than being burnt out early. So I would have made certain things shorter, absolutely. The men's gauntlet, fucking chop that thing to shit. But in terms of the way it was structured, I'm probably on the opposite, where I don't think it was too long in that regard. Because when we got to these, especially, maybe it's different on TV, I don't know. But in terms of like the live thing, it's like, you got to those 3, and those 3 were the things that mattered on this show, outside of the tag in the middle, and you could tell that was what everybody had come for in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. I mean, our perspective has to be from seeing it as a live show. Like, we went back and rewatched on television, but it's never going to be the same thing as when you sit down and like the show starts. So from that side of things, that's where we're going to be. I'm with you. I would have cut a couple of minutes from certain matches, but I can't say that I would have cut anything that was on the show or said we didn't need this. And I didn't feel the length of the show as someone in the audience. And to some degree, you do kind of need down matches, because if you don't have those, that's going to burn you out more than anything else. You kind of need time to be like, all right, I got to go to the toilet. I'm going to go walk around and get a Diet Coke. Like, there's just a point where you
get some of the most awful nachos in any ballpark. Sorry,
they were really bad nachos. I'm not going to lie to you.
What the fuck were they?
The ice cream was great, but the nachos were not good. The margarita was delicious, I'll tell you that. But yeah, I agree with that. Trish, let's talk our favorite thing. Well, before we do that, I do want to say one thing. I mentioned this briefly, and I'm not going to get into any specifics, but I want to give a shout out to Post Wrestling, because I thought, there were a lot of post-show recaps and stuff like that, and different reviews. I thought that John and Y on their post-show did, I think, the best of anybody in terms of summing up a lot of stuff. And getting into, the overall feel of what the thing was, as opposed to other coverage that was done. So I just want to say, nice job on that one, guys. I really enjoyed it. From a numbers perspective, Trish, this seems to have done very well.
Are we doing numbers? I like numbers.
I know you do. We like numbers almost as much as we like Hangman. T-shirt idea to Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. Numbers and Hangman.
I'm more upset about this classification of me as an AEW fan lately, primarily. Come on now, where's that come from? Anyway, so the numbers for this one, the more I think about it, the more I kind of become impressed by what they managed to achieve.
Yeah.
Because when this show went on sale, they were under 10,000 tickets at the end of December. And it felt cold. You would go back and watch that press conference that they did, where barely 100 people turned up.
Yep.
And it just felt like, where is this thing going to end up? And even when you look
Sting and Bryan Danielson, both of whom had retired at that point.
Yeah, there was just something missing. It didn't feel like it had any energy, any impetus towards such a big show. And it's kind of the opposite of what you had with the first year in Wembley, where the scarcity and the enormous kind of size of the building kind of drove a lot of energy towards it, even when they weren't fully concentrating on anything at the time. And Live Nation did a great job of their promotion in the UK as well. But yeah, there was just like, back in December, there was no energy really for this show. And everyone wondered if it was going to be a mistake. And that's the kind of predominant feeling that I can recall around that period. And even when you look back in May, they were, looks like, just around 15,000. And you're thinking, well, can they get to 20? Because if you look at what we did, and we've talked about this before, but you looked at what we did last year, by percentage. So it was last year was 24.5% in the build, similar amount of weeks. And I thought, okay, so if they do that, 25%, when you get to 20,000. Okay, when we get to 20,000, it'll look okay in a ballpark that size. Comparing, think about what Wrestle Dynasty looked like at 16 or 24 with Wrestle Kingdom the day before. So we look at that, and I think that's what encouraged WWE in terms of their counter-programming efforts to think, actually, we can look at starting to make a dent in preventing anybody from coming to this show as a destination, right? So they throw in the 3 other shows. Originally just Saturday Night's Main Event, but they change it once AEW changes the time, and then they add Great American Bash, and they add Evolution. And they try and make this alternative destination weekend in Atlanta. This show ends up selling more and distributing more tickets than those 3 shows combined.
Yep.
But it wasn't just that, and I think this is something that gets missed as well, is they also added 2 TV tapings in Texas to try and stop people from driving up to the show. They also added 2 house shows that happened this past weekend in Texas. So the whole idea of flooding the market wasn't just from a content on TV perspective, but also from a live event perspective. And at that point, when they're doing that, they're not trying to stop a walk-up crowd. They're trying to stop people from going in for the weekend. And that's kind of what you're looking for there. And that didn't work. The internal number on the Saturday morning was 28,500. I believe that came from people that look after their numbers in AEW, from who I've talked to since about it. And, to get 13,500 up more from Double or Nothing is more than what they did in the build for the entire Wembley last year. It's a huge number. They nearly filled, it's very close, the way they filled the building. You look at it around 45%, we're nearly talking half the building being filled in the last couple of months, which tells you the strength of what they put, the 3 matches that we're going to talk about that follow. And then also with pay-per-view buys, so Dave Meltzer's first estimate is 175,000, which would be the 4th biggest in the company. It's actually the high end of the estimate for the Sting retirement, which was 171 to 175 on his scale, ended up at 180. And then you've got All In 2023, which actually has a similar estimate. He had a range for that one, but the middle is very similar to this one, and that one did 200 or 205, depending on whose average you look at. And then you've got, obviously, the 215 for All Out 2021. And that's it, isn't it? That's the 3, yeah. So I was like, how many things? So we are looking at a show that had major competition against it from a live perspective and delivered huge late sales and the best domestic number that they've ever done in the US. $3 million gate. And your headliners were stadium headliners for the very first time. I think everyone forgets that about Jon Moxley, that he's never headlined a stadium show. Never in WWE, never in AEW, never in New Japan. This was his first stadium headline show. It's Adam Page's first stadium headline show. And I know people say, oh, Grand Slam, but it's pay-per-view, right? They're different things. And that was a TV show, and it's hard because, did he technically headline it? Who fucking knows? But in terms of pay-per-view, there's a clear definition on this one. The headline match was, as much as ignore a triple main event, was Adam Page and Jon Moxley. And it's them that will, the marquee where the names will go for this buy rate and for this gate. And, Page owns, I think, the first $1 million gate in AEW history and the first $3 million gate in the US in AEW history, which is kind of cool as well. But it's that case of, so you have the gates and then the buys, I think it's the most impressive buy rate they've ever done. Because the amount of things that are running against them, having Saturday Night's Main Events against them, which I do believe got damaged by AEW running.
Yes.
Because it's the same demos, down demos, especially male 18 to 34, which are damaged by WWE PLEs running early in the day against collisions. So I think you can see the drop, but they dropped 39% for No One in May, and you can account some of that to kind of summer,
John Cena.
because and some of that to John Cena. They were the 2. So you have the summer lull. Your ratings tend to have a dip around the summer. It's why AEW runs so many kind of big named TV shows in the summer, and then you have the absence of John Cena. And I think long term, that's probably the thing that WWE should worry about most, is how much is Cena kind of holding up their numbers right now.
Yep.
And we'll see that next year. But the fact that they are able to achieve this buy rate, which may even get larger with late buys, with all this competition against them, with no gimmicks, there's no retirement gimmick, whatever the fuck that was last year. There's who fucking knows. There's no kind of first time event like Wembley All In. There's no big return first match in 7 years. None of that shit. This was built on the strength of these top 3 matches and the main event in particular is the biggest number for any title change in AEW. It's bigger than CM Punk's win in AEW. It's bigger, well, both of them. I was thinking the first one, but both of them, it all counts. It's bigger than Paige's win over Kenny Omega. It's bigger than Moxley's win over Chris Jericho. Whatever one you want to look at, this is the first one that's essentially the main event is built around a title change with no gimmick, and it's one of the most successful shows that they've ever done. I can't look at it and not think like this is probably their most successful number ever when you look at the context. And it shows you the power of the build, especially for these top 3 matches. And I think Swerve and Ospreay and the Bucks, because the thing about that is it's an amalgamation of the 4 stories that they brought in that makes up that. Should we talk about before, because I've just wandered off as I was always planned to because we said the word numbers. Should we talk about the top 3 matches and everything around that, and then we can come back to some stuff? Yeah.
I think so.
Cool.
I do agree with you. I will say, though, before we move on, I agree with you about the lack of a gimmick. And I also think that not just from a numbers perspective, but from a fan engagement perspective, there's been a lot. There was if you want to look at the counter programming and you want to look at AEW versus WWE, there's no question as to which promotion dominated the weekend from a conversational standpoint. The only thing that really broke through was Seth Rollins' injury, and even that I think was kind of I don't think had the impact they expected it to. But
no, and I think that was deliberate.
Yeah,
I think their strategy. They've moved on from saying, "Oh, we weren't going to damage their ticket numbers, or we weren't going to damage their pay-per-view buyers," which is all bollocks. They absolutely aimed to. They just didn't.
Of course they did.
So now the talking point was, "Oh, we were going to steal the headlines." And
it didn't.
It didn't. I think the best opportunity they had was doing this thing with Rollins. I think it has massive downsides in terms of working the boys. And they should probably learn to not keep repeating AEW's 2022 mistakes or WCW's mistakes from back in the 90s. But alas. But that was the only thing that kind of had any sort of thing. But it didn't really have... People talked about the next day or weeks after, and you might see it split up media coverage, which is one of their big ambitions. I think one of the reasons they added Evolution to this weekend. But I think the feel-good factor around AEW was so vast and so big, and everything that spurns off of it, and especially with someone like Paige at top, because secondary engagement is this is bread and butter, right? So you've got all this stuff coming off it, and I think that flooded everything against them, and they did not get that impetus even with using something like this, whatever the fuck's going on with Seth Rollins, to kind of divert attention. And diverting attention by, one of our top guys' heels is going to be injured is probably not what you wanted when you were doing something like a Goldberg retirement thing.
No.
So, strange one.
All right, so our 3 triple main events that we had. The first one that went was Toni versus Mercedes. And Trish, I don't think that I'm going to shock you by saying that I thought that Toni versus Mercedes had the most sustained crowd engagement with the match of anything. And I from my perspective as a live viewer and watching it back on TV, it was a little bit different. But from my perspective in the audience, it was the first time that the audience was like, I'm fucking here for this whole fucking thing. We're not shutting up. We're not quiet. We're screaming our heads off. We fucking love Toni Storm. Whatever we have to do, we're doing it. There were moments during the main event where I felt like the crowd was like shocked and horrified and like terrified of what was going to happen next, which kind of quieted them down in moments. But I never felt that from the Toni Storm versus Mercedes match. The crowd was fucking rabid for this from the second they came out through the end. It was insane to me.
It's the benefit of also, in a way, I think it was placed well. So I was worried that they'd get the middle placement out of the 3. And I was grateful that they actually went first out of the 3, because it gives you like a different energy, because it's like the crowd was like, oh, these are the things we're here for. And then you had that. And then you've got 2 incredibly over performers.
They're both hugely over.
And everybody knows that Mercedes in that big environment is a spectacular wrestler. She knows how to deliver in main event environment. She knows how to deliver in the all Dame's positions at the top of the card. But these big matches is where she really stands out. It's where she really stands up as well. And from, spectacular entrances again, that plays such a huge part into kind of setting the scene. The videos that they showed beforehand, I think that was fantastic, the summary video, and really laying out kind of differences between it and the similarities between the 2 characters. Yep. And then you get to the structure of the match, and Mercedes is so good at leading these, and I don't think it's so hard to say that she does lead these, but they had so many creative spots. You got the kind of exuberance of the Toni Storm character with the kind of the loofah thing where she runs Mercedes across the rope while she sat on loofah's shoulders. And then with the Meteora from Mercedes onto Toni while she's being carried by loofah. So, you've got all that creativity. And then you've just got generally kind of great counter wrestling kind of ring work. And Mercedes trying to use kind of all the things that have put other people away to put these away. They spoke about how she put away Jamie Hayter and Chris Statlander in these ways, and it doesn't work on Toni. Toni survives. No. And then Toni's also trying that. She's trying to use all the small package and the roll-ups and all the things in the way that she won the belt and other things, and that doesn't see. So you've got this kind of back and forth going on all the way through. And at the end, it kind of feels like Toni's kind of winning the battle. And it's actually quite funny because when you start the match, like the support is probably, I felt like 75-25 towards Toni. And the more it kind of gets in, because like Toni is holding the strength, you actually get a bit more support from Mercedes as we get towards the end. But it's still split. It's not like, we're not saying like, oh, no one turned on Toni Storm. That'd be stupid. But it's like, it just builds up in that way. And even when Toni's kind of escaping out the submissions at the end, I think you can still feel that momentum coming towards her. And it's good because they use a clever trick, because the Athena win made people think that, a lot of people thought, oh, that means Mercedes. And then some of us thought, well, Mercedes has just beaten Athena, so you're not going to do that as a first offence. And that maybe thinks we think too much. But it gave enough doubt in it that people just got behind who they wanted to get behind and invested in the match and the characters. And there was no clever like snarkiness or anything like that. It was just, no, we want to see who's going to win between these two. And we're going to bite on absolutely everything, and we're going to get right into it. And you had the huge impact moves when they did like the triple Storm Zero as well, and people went nuts for that kick out. And then you go back into it, and then you do the finish, and obviously the Storm Zero off the top, which looked brutal. And I think they did well. I think Mercedes is fine, but you do well of like kind of having her sell that as well, because it looked absolutely brutal. But it took something like that to kind of put Mercedes down. And then you're left with the story now of, you had the start of the thing where Mercedes is so confident and she's lifting up the belt on the outside and all the other belts are under cheerleaders, and now this is the one belt she can't have. So she's left with that story, and then you cement Toni Storm as, this is our star. One of our two big stars of this evening. This is our star. Not women's star.
No.
This is our star.
I thought it was, I liked the way that the match started with Toni being just deranged and then slowly losing some of that derangement and then getting that insanity back at the end and beating her. Like, she just grabs her, kisses her, and is like, fuck it, let's go. And I was like, oh, it just was, I thought it was really great. I thought they both looked like they couldn't figure out, like you said, they were fighting to figure out how to make it work, how to beat the other woman, and it took them so much, and they struggled so hard. It was just really well done. They both sold the struggle of that win like so much. Or the struggle of that fight. I'm babbling now because I'm mentally thinking about it. It's distracting me from talking about it. I don't know. They're both such incredible performers. They're both, like you said, Mercedes never misses in these big time matches. Like, she's just always like able to really pull it through. Toni was able to meet her like move for move, and they just looked fantastic. This was probably, in terms of like favorites, I would remove the main event as something that I don't think you can compare to the rest of the card, just based on how I feel about the whole thing. And this, I felt like, was probably tied with the Bucks versus Swerve and Ospreay for my favorite match on the show. Like, just absolutely fantastic from start to finish, and made me appreciate both of these women in a different way than I had up till this point. I also thought it was a good ending to the story, like you said, of Mercedes being overly confident. I'm really curious as to what happens to her when she comes back. She's definitely earned some time off if they decide to give her some time off. And I'm interested
she's here. She's here next week.
In the United Kingdom. And I'm interested to see Toni versus Athena. Like, I think that's going to be really interesting. So, yeah, 2 thumbs up for me on this one. I have no complaints at all.
Yeah, and once you've cemented Toni in that spot, you can use her in the same role that they use Mercedes in.
Yes.
And that's kind of critical coming out, because one of the issues that we've had with the build for this match, or just the build for the show in general, is that there was nothing underneath the top in terms of the women. In terms of another match. And we're realistic. We know that Toni and Mercedes are the key to having kind of multiple segments on Dynamite and Collision for the women, especially Dynamite. So your hope is that they can then start to use Toni in the same way they've used Mercedes to elevate Toni, to kind of position more people up on that level and kind of move more people from the kind of lower card and the mid card up to the higher tier in their division.
Especially given what the gauntlet showed us about the crowd, which is the crowd is as invested or more invested in some of the women than they are in a lot of the men. So like, take advantage of that, you know, like, yeah. Anyway,
it's about time for Athena too. You know, that's been far too long. What the fuck has that been about? So no, that's a good thing.
All right, Okada versus Omega.
Oh no.
Okay. This one had a lot to live up to, Trish, and this was probably the match that a lot had the most varied response to it from our friends and our group that we were hanging out with, from, you know, rabid fineness to rabid hatred.
Sure.
I thought it was good. I thought it was a good AEW match. Like, this was the kind of good match that I would expect to see on any AEW card, like at a semi-main or something like that didn't involve Adam Copeland, I guess I should say. Like a good quality match. But I didn't think that it transcended time and space the way that other Okada versus Omega matches have.
I want to point out that I think it's very much different depending on what you've seen as well. So from our experience, the people that we know that haven't seen any of the series were higher on this match than anybody that has.
Yes.
And my personal perspective is I can understand what they were trying to do. I can see the story, you know, that I think we're leaning too very much heavy on the kind of Kenny Stomach story, and I think it's kind of undermined by seeing the match with Takeshita where they played on it but didn't, and the one with Gabe Kidd, and I feel like this one fell too much into that line. I can look at it and think it's a semi-main event. They didn't overall the main event. You have the disappointing finish, and then that sets up for the triumph afterwards. You can do a rematch. You can do the Continental rules that are now the unified rules and have no interference, and possibly we can live up to more of what's expected. But I can't get past how I felt about the match, and that's what I'll talk about. Is I didn't feel it, and I went back and I watched it, and I was like, "Am I going to feel differently about it?" And I probably don't. I actually probably feel worse. And it's like, it's not a bad match. I'm not saying it's a bad match, and I wouldn't say that I had the expectations that a lot of people did going into this, because I'm probably not as big into the original series as a lot of other people are, and that's okay. You know, Okada is not a wrestler that I enjoy as much as others. That's not to say I don't think he's a great wrestler. It doesn't think that some of the matches are great. I just don't have that feeling, and that's different with Kenny. You know, Kenny, especially in a stadium environment, is always something that I've gravitated towards. He has that explosivity, that energy. He brings something different. They hate that word aura, but it is. There is something about that. And I didn't feel any of that here. And I'm trying to work it out if it's just the match structure, if it's anything like that. And some of it is. It's the way that, you know, Kenny's the guy, Okada's the guy in control for much of it. There's not really a lot of times where he comes out, you're playing off the injury, and then he gets kind of a brief kind of up period, and then there's some really weird stuff. So it's like, why is he celebrating the pinfalls with his arms in the air? Are we trying to portray that he was overconfident? But that's not what you're doing in the build, right? You're doing this thing that you're trying to get revenge, because you're the guy that's been beaten the shit out of in the build. You're the guy that lost your friends to this guy. You're the guy that, you know, had your Don Callis turn on you as well with him, and then the big kind of the blood stomach angle, whatever. So it's like, that was really strange. And then there's just little bits of it where it's like, we're used to the Okada kind of structure, because Okada's very much always had the kind of slow start, and then you have the big 5 minutes. I always think there's a G1 match with Sanada I always go back to, which everyone thinks is great, and actually is not that great for like 25 minutes, and you have this huge, amazing last 5 minutes. Everyone's like, do you want to see that match in the G1? We all think Sanada could be champion. Look how that fucking worked out. But you do have that energy to it. And then, so this one kind of starts slow, and you have the control periods, and I understand it, because you want everyone to get behind Kenny as a babyface, and we're playing off this injury thing and that sort of thing. But it just never kind of changes from there. I don't feel like the pace picks up. And at the end, when you start picking up the counter pace, it's like boom, and it's over. And the back part of it is so, it's kind of weird, because it's close to the interference. So you have like Callis pulling out the referee to stop like the pin after the one-way angel, but also doesn't get thrown out by the replacement ref, which is, it's fine. It's kind of similar to my complaints about the rematch of Will Ospreay in Toronto, but it's like, well, he did actually get thrown, actually, thinking about it, but it's like, okay, fine, whatever. But the finish is so far away from the interference that it almost feels clean, although it's not. And that's what kind of makes it feel even more disappointing. It's not like he's taken out of it. It's like literally a couple of counters and then Rainmaker bang, it's done, 1, 2, 3. So I don't know. I was left cold by it in the moment, and I'm left cold by it now. And I can see where it could go. I could see the workmanship and Kenny trying to, some of the selling and that sort of thing, but all the little elements around it, whether it's the interference, whether it's kind of the structure, the slow play, or I think for me it's now an over-reliance on the diverticulitis angle. All of it, I didn't connect with it in a way that I normally do with big Kenny Omega matches.
I didn't think, I'm with you, I'm kind of over the diverticulitis stuff. Like, it's been fine, but at the same time, it seems like it just is like a get-out-of-jail-free card for his opponents, and there's a point where, like I said earlier, like the heat's great, but at some point somebody's got to fire up and you have to have a babyface win. And I think, there were people who said before the match, well, it's obvious that Okada's winning, based off of the record and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, based off the record, fine, but that wasn't the story they were telling us in the lead up. As you pointed out on one of our episodes, like, Kenny's getting the shit beat out of him every week. Like, he never had the upper hand in any of these meetings with Okada. So that kind of leads you to think he's going to come back and get the win because he was never able to kind of overcome it. Whereas that's not the story they told in the ring. This is one of the few matches on this card where I felt like the story they told in the ring didn't match the build, right? Like, I couldn't quite reconcile those in my mind.
I felt like it matched the build in terms of the way the match was structured, in terms of like Kenny playing off the injury or the illness, whichever way you want to look at it. But I don't think the end matches the build in terms of you've kind of stacked the depth so much against the babyface.
Right.
When they don't overcome, they just kind of feel like a bit of a failure, and maybe you can come back to that. Maybe, we look back on this and it's the first chapter of something. But maybe it's because they put this so much as the end that it also feels like an anticlimax. I don't know. But it's one of those things. I think that my bigger feeling, and I felt like this for a little while, is that the playing into big New Japan matches as attractions in AEW, I don't think it works. I don't think it works. I can't think of, I was trying to rack my brain on this, and I can think of matches that were good or great, that, compared to the New Japan matches, but I'm trying to think of something that was like a sequel that was better. Because when you look at the original Kenny Okada series, these matches outdid each other. And so when you see like a series of matches, you kind of want to feel it going up. And it's funny, when we talk about the main event, you can look at how that match built on the Texas Death Match at Revolution 23. Whether you think it was better or not is different, but it built on it and became something bigger, whereas I don't think this did. And I think that's something that sits in my mind, is that this, whenever we've done these sort of matches, whether it was even like Will and Kenny, I don't think was quite on the same level as Will and Kenny in the Dome or anything like that, but it seems to be like a constant feeling for me where, I don't know if it's just because it's American wrestling and the differences with the camera shooting or the crowd build or just the stakes involved. The stakes were not, this is not the IWGP World title that's not, been lost for however many months, 18 months, whatever it was. But it's like, there's something missing that you just don't need to do this. Why are we replicating something where if we can't build it higher, then it might be better to leave it alone.
Well, you say this about New Japan, but is there another match from another promotion that they've done in AEW that's been better than the previous one? I don't think Punk and Samoa Joe lived up to what people had as the original. Nigel and Danielson certainly didn't. Has there been a match or a series that has occurred in another promotion that AEW did a rematch of it better?
Maybe we'll leave that question open.
Tell us if you think.
Come up with something.
I could be fucking blanking right now, but I don't see it. So, anyway. I'm still waiting for the Kenny Omega that was at the Dome in January to show up in AEW, and I'm not sure why he hasn't. And it's fine. Like, I enjoyed this match. I can't I'm not going to complain about this match. Like you said, it's not like it was bad, but it certainly wasn't as emotionally there the way that I kind of expected it to be, I guess. And like you said, I was not Kenny. Again, it was a good performance, but was it the performance I was expecting? Not necessarily. I mean, maybe I'm being really unfair in that, but
the thing about that is that he's been in kind of like his own vortex since he came back.
Yeah.
So you've got this big story encompassing stuff involving a lot of the people that he was involved with at the start of the year. Yep. Right? So he's been involved with Will Ospreay at the start of the year.
Yep.
Climbing the rafters and whatever. And he's been involved with the Young Bucks. When they came back, he was involved in the initial program kind of with them and then up to Double or Nothing and then comes away. And that thing of him coming away from kind of these big all-encompassing stories has left him feeling very much on his own. And it gets me to a point where it's like, it's difficult to see where he goes from here. And I guess that's something interesting going towards the end of the year. Where it's because he doesn't feel as much part of it as he should have or as he should do for everything that's kind of going on. So I'd like to see him get a bit more involved in other things. I'd like to see him become involved with other people. There are still people out there that we'd like to see him kind of involve and wrestle with that would be of major benefit. I would absolutely love, I know how much beloved Kenny is, and he absolutely is, but I'd love to see him play with more of that character on the edge that he had at Wrestle Kingdom and kind of bring that to TV as well, and especially while you have this kind of lack of depth in heels that they have in AEW. There's so many things I'd like to see, and I just feel like there's always a step where I'm just like, and maybe, there's health concerns and everything like that. We don't know. We don't know the extent of these things.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. It still feels like this year, like there's something missing in this return, and I can't put my finger exactly on what it is. And this didn't change my mind for me. We'll see how the next few months goes. And that brings us to the main event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was let's be realistic. This felt like the match that everybody in the audience was there to see. This was the match that when the card got shown on the big screen, this got the biggest reactions. Mm-hmm. This was the match that everybody there was in a Hangman shirt. It felt like it was, and I owe men an apology, just men in general, because I think I said to Leah, I was like, no, I had the pink Leaves This Plant shirt on, and I was like, I'm not going to see a man in this shirt. I'm going to count how many men I see in it. And
there's tons.
An hour and a half in, I was like, oh, there's a fucking million men in this shirt. I have to eat shit. I'm so full of shit. There were millions and millions of men in that shirt. It was crazy. We tried to go buy Hangman shirts on Saturday morning at the merch store outside, and they were sold out.
Yeah, they were sold out Wednesday night. I got messages Wednesday night. They were sold out of the pink one in there, and they were sold out of the tie-dye variant thing they did of the pink one in Friday, and also the Yawling Cowboy one. So they did a huge merchandise number. They're looking at over 1.2 million combined with Stardust. Stardust? Jesus Christ.
Sorry, I enjoyed that a lot.
Thanks.
With StarCast, yes.
StarCast and the venue merch, and yeah, they didn't have enough. Between that, there were some other items as well. I think the Will Ospreay Crystal Palace looking shirt. That's what I'm going to call it, the football shirt. He needs to go to the Championship. You're not going to get nothing with the Premier League because Fanatics have wrapped all that shit up and they're with WWE. Yeah. You need to go to the Championship. You need to go get some of these clubs and get their investment in. Here's a good merch idea for you, Will, because come on now, mate. Go to all these clubs. I think they'd die for it. But things like that, yeah, they were way, way out. They'd completely either underestimated what they were going to need for these ones, and they could have done far, far more with merch. But it's like a never-ending story, isn't it? But yeah, but I thought, yeah, tons of shirts for him and the crowd. And also, I've made this point to some people in AEW this week as well. I've been to a lot of these things, and I have never, ever, ever seen that many women in the crowd at a major show, ever. Closest I've been to it is in Japan, where it's a split between, and that's more with the Japanese population than it is the travellers. But I have never, ever seen that many women at a show, ever. And
there
it was
a lot of women in the audience.
I think on Tunnel Talk they called them unaccompanied.
Unaccompanied women.
Unaccompanied women, which absolutely rings true. And it was very
means you're not with a boyfriend, you're not with a significant other. It's not part of a date thing that you agreed to go with.
And it was really, really clear who they were there for. Let's be honest.
Girlfriends.
Yeah, it was so clear who they were there for, and it was like, it's really funny to see, like, you know, people get on us about, oh, you talk about his numbers all the time with women. It's like, yeah, because no one else wants to fucking do it, and it's a fucking trend. The same way we looked at Toni Storm when, you know, I'm not the biggest. At the start of this program of the Toni Mariah stuff, I wasn't anywhere near as invested as you were, especially like when, you know, Forbidden Door last year, you know, it was not on the same level, right? But we could see the trend. We could see the number trend. You know, and we, you know, identified it. And it's the same thing with this. It's like we said for months, like, this guy with women, it's like, and especially, and young people, you know, see 1834 as well, there's something there that will carry him in the same way that Jon Moxley was carried by young women that then became female 35 to 49 when he came into AEW because of the Shield. Same thing. Yep. And then to see it actually in the flesh was very, very funny. It's like, oh, here's this thing that we say about numbers, and here's literally it here. And yeah, I felt that was something that you could just see straight away as we went into this thing. But in regards to the main event itself, what was your overall feeling at the end of this? How did you feel about this match?
I thought it was perfect when I was done with it. I was elated from start to finish. Basically, from the time that they started the intro to when the music hit to him coming out, the whole fucking thing I thought was beautiful. The interferences, the Darby and Danielson run-in, the stuff with Swerve, everything. The end, the post-match speech, everything start to finish I thought was absolutely perfect. I couldn't have asked for it to be done better. There was nothing I would have changed. There was nothing I was like, oh, they should have done X, Y, or Z. Like, maybe could they have made different choices that would have worked just as well? Sure, but they didn't need to. Everything was perfectly done. And rewatching it on television, I did not change anything on my mind. I was like, well, maybe it won't be as good as it was. It was better almost, because I picked up on small things that I wasn't able to see in the theater, in the stadium. It was the kind of thing that I left the show buzzing. You and I were both buzzing when it was over. We were like, our friends were all buzzing. Everybody we talked to was like, what a fantastic fucking show. Like, it was just a capper. It was the perfect match ending to what was a really great show overall, and I don't think they could have done anything better than they did.
It was a perfect moment. It was the right person chasing.
Yep.
And it was the biggest triumph they've ever had. There's never been a moment like that. In fact, if I think about this earlier, and the funniest thing is the nearest one that you can come to it, really, that felt like that was the first time we won.
Yeah. But even that, I don't think felt like this.
No, it didn't. And the reason behind that is, and this is probably the biggest misconception when people talk about this match and about this story, is it wasn't one story. We had this amalgamation of 4 separate stories into this one match and this one moment and this thing of triumph that all played in and built it to such an extent that it just felt so huge. So you've got the Death Rider story. Okay. And within the Death Rider story, you have this thing of the hypocritical kind of Mox who believes that he wants somebody to step up to him. But anytime anybody does step up, you've got this gang of people that will stop them from getting anywhere. So, but in the back of this kind of kayfabe thing, he wants somebody who will die for AEW, right? So he kept saying at the start, I want somebody who will die for AEW. I want someone who has like this, hasn't reached their potential, is under their potential where they are. And then also he keeps going on about kind of, I need everybody to work, you know, you need to work together to defeat me. That was like the whole story of the World's End match, right? With Cassidy, Jay White and Paige. And it's like all these things come underneath, and then you bring all of those themes in. Because here is this character that is an AEW original, who had the title run. His losing of the belt is the first point of failure. And not just for in kayfabe, you know, if you're looking at the belt losing its way, and the company losing its way, but also in terms of how some people feel about the company, right? I hear the words original sin all the time, you know.
Yep.
Around Double or Nothing 2022. So you have all those elements in that part of Moxie's story. And then what they did was, with the Death Rider story, is if you want to look at it and, you know, just take your brain away from what you've been told, because yes, Paige was a pivot. Like, we don't need to pretend or argue about it. He was a pivot. But it's like, in kayfabe, his story, this alternative timeline to whatever they were going to do with Darby Allin, is there in November, right?
Yes.
So you do the thing at Full Gear where Paige chases Jay White out and Mox's face with him, and he's petrified of him. It's the first time Moxley's looked scared since this whole thing has begun. Then you do the thing with World's End, and, you know, Page didn't get to talk, he lost his voice in that bit, but you still do that match where the guy that Moxley is petrified of and feels like could be, you know, someone that's a real threat to him, it's Page. And, you know, they pin Jay White in that match, they make the big deal out of them not being able to work together. It's not great for Cassidy, it wasn't great for Jay White either. But that's what they do. And in that period also is when you have Christopher Daniels saying, I believe you could be this guy. You could free this company. You could be the one that steps back up if you just realise who you are. It's not even a redemption story. It's more of a kind of, you can be this guy, right? And then you have the stuff with Christopher Daniels, and you do the death match and everything that turns out, and then he turns face. Then you do the stuff with MJF, and it's all about who's going to be the first second champion between the two. So you're bringing him and keeping him around the belt. Then you do the stuff with Swerve Strickland, when Swerve goes for the belt, and the Bucks coming back and costing him, and Paige being around and seeing it. And at that point, you know, Paige is very much involved in this Death Rider story as well, because the Death Riders have now kind of joined with the Bucks story and the EVP story that's been going on for the last year. That's moved away from the Kenny Omega Okada vortex and into the Death Rider story. And then you have the relationship with Paige and the Bucks that they expertly called back to straight after Double or Nothing to make sure that was involved as well. So all of a sudden we're around like 1, 2 stories. So we got the Bucks story, we got the Death Rider story. Paige is already involved in Death Rider story, but then you bring in Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page, this big undercard feud that's kind of powered AEW through some of its worst periods in the last few years. And you're bringing that emotion into it, and you're building that into it. And then we're adding Will Ospreay as our kind of, I always think of him like Gonzo in the Muppet Christmas Carol type of narrator, you know, like he's that kind of thing, bringing that part of the story together. But it was good. It was a good role for him. It showed something different in his kind of personality, I think, as well, and in that spot. So then you have that part of the story. So you've brought in this huge feud that's like really been popular with large parts of your younger fan base in particular, and you bring that in. And then on the undercurrent of all that, you've got the Moxley story with Adam Page, because Moxley might blame, you know, they play into the stuff in 2022. Moxley makes a very blatant Punk reference, Hangman makes very subtle ones. But they bring up that that's where he failed, that's where he goes off the rails, that's where everything stopped, and they bring that back to that moment in this. And then you play off the fact that the history between Moxley and Page in that with the Texas Death Match, that's where Moxley starts to spiral. That's where he realizes he isn't invincible. That's why we brought the chain back into it, and we kind of go back to that finish. That's where Page actually starts to turn from the light to the dark, and he uses the kind of clothing choices in order to do that as well. So that's such a match that's so important to the structure of this one, but also to these two characters. So now we're up to like 4 stories, and then you have Page's kind of comeback and redemption and returning to the top of the, you know, as the main character, as the babyface. It's this amalgamation of all these different stories that makes this feel so big. It's not just the Death Rider story anymore, or the Swerve Hangman story anymore, or the story with the Bucks and the EVPs. It's all these things coming together at a perfect time in one match that was built perfectly into a match that matched the structure of all these things, included all these things, but never got away from the big babyface moment and making that big babyface moment.
I think that you're right about the multiple stories, and I think I don't want to say lucked out, but I think Hangman winning here makes the World's End build and all the stuff there look better, because it was going someplace as opposed to like what you said. And I agree with you that I think it would have been, if injuries hadn't been an issue, having OC and Jay White involved in the finish here would have been helpful, I think, maybe to them. They definitely, I think, both came across and were damaged the most by that feud, and I think again, injuries have prevented them from really getting back out of that. But I think my train of thoughts derailed. But I agree with you that it definitely made it seem like that was a conscious choice rather than sort of a happy accident. And I think it helped a lot in retrospect that you could then point back to. And this is where it helps that Hangman does do such a good job of tying his own stuff together, even if he's not sure where it's going to go, that you had that stuff from World's End that then you can tie back into, and okay, now like, hey, he does need to work with people. That does become a giant theme of this. That is something that has been something Mox has been touching on since the very beginning, that they kind of got away from a little bit and now been able to move back to. And I do think that it did make the whole thing seem like it was a much, much bigger deal than it would have been if it was just this one storyline ending.
there were so many things in the structure of this build and the structure of the match that was so different from the previous Death Rider stuff as well, that made this work. So in terms of the structure of the build, you didn't have the endless heel beatdowns and that sort of thing, where the babyface looks kind of like an idiot. In fact, we had the bit at the end where you have the babyface being clever and tricking the heel through his frustration into a match that the babyface has the advantage in. And then you kind of have to come back from that, right? So you've got this thing where Paige has lured Moxley into a death match when he's 4-1. Moxley, I don't think Moxley's ever won a death match, actually, thinking about it. So you know that he has that advantage, and you know that Paige can beat him. So you then have to stack the deck again against the babyface. And that's why you do the stuff with the first bit where you take out Samoa Joe, so you know, and the op, so you know they're going to have the number advantage. It's why you then do that again with Will Ospreay when he comes out, because you are kind of showing, oh, if you come out, this is what's going to happen to you. So you have to stack that against Paige, because Paige actually starts with the advantage in the match. So, and I thought what they did with the interference was very, very clever in this one, because what we've seen in the past with the Death Rider matches, if we've done like a 20-minute match, we've had some really, sorry Mox, it's funny, isn't it? People say, oh, you can't criticize your favourite wrestlers. Well, I'm going to say this. We've had some really shitty fucking grappling sequences at the start of matches to absolute fucking silence. And then when we've tried to get the babyface comeback, it's meant nothing because everyone's just waiting for the fucking interference.
Yes.
And that's happened time and time again. It happened in the Strickland match. It was, and then, you know, the interference was even worse because it made them all look like idiots. Now you can say it's reprieved by this moment. Maybe it is because you've wrapped it so well together, and that tells you how good the work has been since Double or Nothing to do that. But it's like, we had this structure. And what they did with this match was completely different in the structure. So what we did was we knew we needed to get the crowd in quick, right? So we start literally with laying in forearms. Then we get to the fork spot, and we have that callback to the Revolution 23 match, and Hangman, you know, challenges Mox brings a fork like he did last time. Well, Hangman's got one in his boot, and then he splits that head open, and the crowd goes fucking apeshit. I think it was a guy that nearly fell over his own chair.
It was the first moment in the match itself that the crowd lost their shit.
And you're going to get that because they had to pick that crowd up after the ending of Okada and Omega, right? So you want to get that speed going really, really quick. You don't want to wait for it like 10 minutes, or, you know, you could do what the Bucks and Swerve and Ospreay did, and you have to kind of use that control period to get through that. They want to do that with this main. It's very similar to the way that they tried to create that kind of frenetic energy with the first one, but you can't do it in the same way because you don't want the, you know, the to and fro on this one. You need to kind of have the babyface kind of run out early and then use the interference to nullify that advantage, which is what they did. And they got Marina involved really, really early, which was the right thing to do because you've built that into the build already, and she's always out there with Moxley. And that means that once, you know, you've accepted the interference in a way from the start because it's built into the match from the start with Marina. I thought Marina was really, really good in this match in terms of doing all the things that keep things moving.
She was, ever since Revolution, ever since Sting's retirement, they have made the really good choice of always having a second there to help with these matches, to help with like the logistics and the furniture moving and all the shit that they have to do. And it's been such a benefit. It's kept the tempo of these matches up. Mm-hmm. It's given like it's given like a special, like with Marina, like Marina's done such a great job in this role. Like people shit on her early, and I was like, what the, like she's managed to pull off being the female heavy, being Mox's like number one, clearly, in a way that I don't know that anybody else could have done. And she had a credibility here where they ran off the fucking interference, and I was like, is Marina still on the outside? Is she still down on the floor? Because you knew she was coming back at some point, that she was too dangerous to just be taken out the way she was with that table bump.
Well, the thing about that table bump that's really, really good is that they build to it. So you have her interfere early. You're building off that buckshot in the 300th episode Dynamite as well. So you have this relationship between the two characters as well. And obviously, of course, they have chemistry because it's Paige, but if anybody, but she's very good at that too. But it's like you have that thing where she's constantly involved. So you then accept the fact that if he does anything to her, it's like, yeah, okay, fine. And that one was great because that's after that initial wave of interference. And it's like, you think Paige has completely got the momentum here. It's over. He's up for the buckshot. And then she grabs him. And then automatically he gets her up into the fireman's carry and drops her into the table. You forget it's fucking there. You forgot they set that table up earlier. So it's like bang, 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 and the shock of it. And then you get the big reaction out of it. And it's such a clever way of doing it. And I thought even like all the way through from her, because then she gets a little bit of retaliation when she picks Moxley up later in the match at 9. And she gives the middle finger to Paige. And then you get the finish, involved with the kind of finishing sequence where, Moxley's like instructs her. It's where you get the key off her because that's something else that they needed to do. And then the handcuff thing, which is kind of corny with Nana. But, I look at it and think, oh, he's waiting for whoever goes out there and it happens to get that briefcase because they've gone to that briefcase every time. You're playing off these things that they've done every time, right? So then she goes out there and then the handcuff thing and that moment and the pop for Nana. So everything about what she did worked. And I think she was such an important thing to the structure of this match. And then allowing that kind of thing where you have that kind of thing against the babyface from the start. So it's never one-on-one in that sense until the very, very end. And that allows you to have some sort of thing where you don't think it's kind of inevitable that Paige is going to win. And I think that's what they did really well with this whole build, because this could have been a procession, right? He does that promo at the start of the build where he promises, right? And at that point, they're saying, buy your fucking tickets. Yeah. Right? We knew it. We watched it by that time. The Collision that weekend when we watched it in Boston, and they ran like so many vignettes on the All-In thing, and they were like, I'm going to free this bow. It's like, this is so fucking obvious.
The tweet of him with the Owen belt, raising the Owen belt in the air and be like, be there at All-In. It was like, oh, shit, are you telling me he's winning? I think
exactly. But you have to put so much doubt in it, and the way they built the build to it put doubt in people's minds still. And I find that this page probably helps too because of everything that's happened in the past. But they did such a great job of that, and I think she did a great job in the main event of that. And then you can have the other interference, and when they do the other interference, when they have the Death Riders come out, with Yuta comes out when you think Paige has pretty much got control of it. Same with Claudio, and then you do the Ospreay thing and get rid of him and get Kid and whatever. And then you do the bit where Paige is just literally getting control and Moxley is near enough done, and that's where they resort to the kind of everything else. So then you get to the bit with the plastic bag, and that's the bit where they can't kill Paige, because what you've been doing is he's been saying in the build, you have to, what does he say? He's like, give me. Yeah, he kept saying you have to kill me, and he said, give me, I can't think what it was, or give me death. Someone's going to be shouting at me right now. But they play into that whole thing they feel because they can't kill him. And every time they do something to him, even though there's multiple of them, he gets up at 9. And the crowd are so anxious about him getting up. They're not even chanting cowboy shit, they're just chanting Hangman, Hangman, Hangman. And they're not thinking about who's coming next. No one's chanting for who could be next out, who could be this. They're just so invested in where the match was going. And that's where then you can hit the interference. And you can do that thing where we're doing the plastic bag, and then obviously you've got the natural point for Danielson and Darby to come in. Danielson comes out the crowd, actually jumps up behind Hangman. Hangman has to fly to one side in a way. And then you can do that, and then you get obviously the Darby drop down where he'd been put up 3 or 4 hours before, wherever it was, and the video's corny, but hey, look, if you get a video from the top of Everest, fucking allow it.
I mean, come on, if you can do a promo from the top of Everest, you have to.
Exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. Sorry. So you do that, and what they do, what's really great with that, is that they just remove the interference. They never touch Jon Moxley. It's never to them. There's no thing like the people point out the Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns thing where the baby faces all touch the heels. There was none of that, right? So, and then straight after that, they do something big between them to get the impetus straight back on the match. There's no people doing yes chants for 10 minutes or chanting for whoever else think next. That bit of interference go. They're not just then chanting, oh, Swerve, where's Swerve? No, we're just straight back into the match because we've done this suplex from the fucking from the ring onto the barbed boards, and we've done the Deadeye through the table. We're straight back into. We are so invested about the outcome of this match. Everything around it is just around that, but everything builds towards this moment. And then when you get towards the end, and obviously you knew you were going to have the Swerve thing with the Bucks, so the Bucks come out, they give him the kicks, so you can fall back to what happened in 2021, where they were the ones giving him the nod. And then when you get that moment where Nana pops up and you know Swerve's coming, and that's where you get the Swerve's house chance. And it's at a down point in the match, so you know that it's it's not distracting from anything. That's when it kicks in. And he comes out and they pay off what they did on Collision, where you could see what they were building to, and it gives in that chain. And it's such a satisfying moment in their journey. And their journey, that's a stop in their journey. It's not the end point. And then Hangman, I always think about this because I think about the nod that Matt Jackson gives Paige at 2021. It's him giving like Swerve like the slight little nod. Then he gets up with with the chain and hits Moxley across with it. And then you get into that finishing sequence with the bed of nails. And just phenomenal sell at the end from Moxley as well. And I don't think the commentary on this whole show was very strong.
No,
but the commentary at the very end of that main event, Excalibur in particular, from the way that he introduced Paige and linked up the Mexico promo, which was always about people come together and him realizing they were coming together, and linked that into his kind of description of Paige on his intro, to that very finishing sequence where the way he described Moxley's struggle and then the finish and kind of what it meant to everybody and to Paige. I thought he was really good in that moment in particular.
I don't know that I fully agree with that, because I have it in the back of my head. I have Excalibur being like, who would have thought that Swerve would help? And I was like, we kind of all thought that was going to happen. We watched the show. But again, I recognize that that's, I thought there were a lot of really good things about this. I thought that the way they set that up, where it wasn't just it was a 50-50 match, but in different ways. Like, you could see that Moxley was going for the interferences because, he was willing to do the interferences to begin with, but he was clearly at a point where he was like, oh shit, this guy could beat me, right? Like Hangman was not getting the shit kicked out of him for the entire match. Like, he had moments in the beginning where it looked bad, but he fought back. Like you said, he kept getting up at 9. Mm-hmm. He got up at 9 so many times. Like, it was just... The other things that I picked up on that I thought were really interesting, especially given the stuff they did on Wednesday, is that in the beginning of the match where Mox attacks Hangman with the barbed wire for the first time, he starts screaming at him and he's like, I wanted the death match. I'm the fucking champion of the fucking world. Like, and he says it repeatedly. He says it again later after he puts Hangman through the barbed wire with the curb stomp. He says, I'm the fucking champion of the world, which again, based on what Hangman said on Wednesday night, I thought was really interesting. I thought the stuff with Prince Nana and the way that they did that with Marina with the desk was really beautiful. I did not see that coming at all, although I probably should have. And the fact that they gave you Nana to as a distraction, because then Swerve can get down the ramp without being a focal point, and you're suddenly but at the same time it's Nana, so you're Swerve's not far behind him. Swerve's coming. You sort of see that coming. I liked the way that they had the Bucks as the final interference to, like you said, call back to Swerve and the disagreement with them. I like that Ospreay got taken out really early, that it was here's this extremely, optimistic, lovable guy who's just going to get the shit beat out of him because he's so stupid. He doesn't think to come in with other people. He's like, I got to go by myself. I don't know. I thought it was really, really well done. And I thought you have to give a tremendous amount of praise to Jon Moxley. And we have shit on Jon Moxley justifiably, I think, for a chunk of this brain, because a lot of it hasn't been very good, but you could not ask somebody to put another person over harder than Mox did with Hangman in this match. And not just this match, but basically the build. Pretty much since the Owen, he has done everything in his power to make it clear that Hangman is the guy, capital T, capital G, and he's done it. You couldn't ask for anything else. The way he tapped out, the way that he sold, and they brought this up on Waffly Bollocks, so I want to make sure I give them credit, but the fact that Hangman's I will have to die for this, and Mox was not willing to die for it. He reached the point where he was going to be choked out, and he said, nope, I'm not going to be choked out. I just thought that was fantastic. And, the ending was just fucking great. It was everything you wanted in wrestling. Like you said, you chase that feeling. This match, this whole show was that feeling. We restored it. What have we said for the last, how many, we're on episode, this is episode 45. We have spent 45 episodes of this wrestling podcast telling you to give Hangman the ball and let him score. And he fucking did it. And you got huge numbers and you got huge fucking attendance, and the women were going crazy, and we told you so.
Is this you? Are you taking a victory lap?
I think I'm going to take a little victory lap, Trish. We fucking told you so. You did it. You pleased your audience. Nobody was fucking happier. Everybody went home thrilled. What else could you want out of that, Trish? What else could you want?
Yeah, it was an incredible moment, and you can see how much it meant to him. And from all intents and purposes, really meant to him. And how much it meant to everybody else as well. But this, I don't know, it was incredible moment, and you can see how much it meant to him. And from all intents and purposes, really meant to him. And how much it meant to everybody else as well. But this, I don't know, it was incredible moment, and you can see how much it meant to him. And how much it meant to everybody else as well. But some kind of things that stuck out to me as well with this. And it's funny, isn't it? Because the Moxie kayfabe thing is he was trying to find someone who would die for AEW. And he did.
Yeah.
And he was trying to find somebody who, could be real, like, the face of that kind of fight. And he found that too. And he found it in a guy to Jon Moxley, from everyone we've spoken to, is a guy he's always felt that way about. And yeah, he may have gazumped him last summer, but he actually ended up with a guy that he's always wanted to kind of get to that position, but felt like maybe was damaged in a way by everything that happened with the CM Punk saga. But he's always been in his corner, always fought for him in general, always been behind him. And you could see how much it meant to him that it was Hangman as well. I think you could absolutely see that. And when you look at Moxie's matches in AEW, I don't think he's had any better feuds, like long-term feuds or matches, than the series that he's had with Paige. And
Orange Cassidy.
but the program,
I agree.
The match All Out is great. The promos before it is great, but the program is overhaul. And I know, like, it's damaged by the injury that Moxley suffered, the concussion that he had. But it's not even that. I wouldn't put on the level of the two death matches that they've had together. And I think there's something to that. The way that these two work together, you get the best of Jon Moxley. Whether you've looked at Jon Moxley since maybe the start of 2024 and said, is this the same guy? Well, he's still in there, and when he's in the most is when he's in with someone that he's so invested in, and I don't think there's anyone he's more invested in this company, really. And I think we'll see that continue a little bit, and which brings us on to kind of follow-up. So what did you think of what they did with Paige and, I guess, in part with Moxley on Wednesday night?
I thought it was everything you wanted it to be. I don't think you could have a bigger, more obvious contrast from the way that they treated Hangman after he won the title last time to the way that they treated him after he won the title this time. Like, what else do you want? I thought he came out, he gave an incredible opening promo. He looked like a fucking $1 million. He looked confident in a way that he didn't the last time, and he was in control, I felt, in a way that he wasn't the last time. The promo was about him. There was nobody else out there. It wasn't about Max. It wasn't about anybody else. It was fucking about him. I thought it was spectacular. The match was the same way. Like, the match built around Mox being afraid of him and him, not being afraid of Mox and him being like, fucking come get me. It was just, I thought it was great. I don't think, I appreciate that some people are confused and afraid as to why they've kept this feud going if they've had the final blow-off match. I think there's some things that make it clear why they have kept it going. I'm fine with it continuing because I don't really see an obvious, I don't really think they're ready to go for the MJF challenge just yet. Especially when MJF's got obviously Arena Mexico shit to deal with. And I think it makes sense. I think you're clearly moving towards a blood and guts, coming up in the next month or two. And I have no problem with it. I think it makes sense for this character of Moxie to not be willing to give up and just go away. And I think it also leads you to the start of a Death Riders breakup angle, which I think you kind of need to have. To give those guys a little bit something to do. And I think, I don't know, I don't have an issue with it. I think the way that they put him out there he looks amazing and yeah.
Yeah, so I was in Norfolk in 2021, and I repeat that a lot, but I knew that night kind of the direction that reign was going to go. And I don't know, Susie, our friend Susie and Scott was probably sick of me saying this because I've been saying it for 4 years now. But I knew. I could feel it. Like, the moment you walked in that venue, you didn't see a shred of merch for someone who was, like, half of the audience were wearing his merch outside. He comes out, he does the promo, he's immediately put behind Bryan Danielson in the order of importance in the way they structured that night. Yep. The night ends up, you don't see him for the rest. It's all about MJF and CM Punk in the middle. Obviously, that got worse the following week when they spent the first 45 minutes of the episode in Chicago on that program. So you could immediately see the pecking order. And even at the
end,
he
didn't have a match for what, like 4 weeks?
Yeah, he didn't wrestle until when it was coming.
Right.
And then you could also feel it in regards of the way that closed the show. He didn't close the show on his own. I know he had to close the show with CM Punk. And it was like, nah. And I could just feel it then. I knew. Like, that next day, I was bothered by it in a weird way. Like, not in terms of, like, not actually bothered by it, but, when you can't shift a thought and you're just kind of like, I can kind of feel where this is going, and you just know. You just have that that kind of impetus. So I just know. And that's how he played out. And he was secondary. And maybe he wasn't at that position in his career or his headspace at the time where he could counter that. And it was a new challenge. You know, you've got these huge names coming in from outside, political forces. It's very different. And then he obviously lost being able to work with Mox at the start, because that was where they were originally going after Full Gear 21. So you had so many of those things happen. Whereas this time, this guy worked it out. He knows where he's going. He knows who he is. He knows what he can do. He knows kind of who he has the power to work and that sort of thing. And you could see that. And we talked about his confidence in terms of making the decision, you know, to pitch the thing for I Want to Open Grand Slam Mexico, which Tony Khan actually said in an interview this week. So there you go. If you think we're lying to you, we're not. But it was interesting to think. People are like, oh, you're over talking his confidence, and then Tony Khan's like, oh yeah, he did this. I was like, yeah, see. But you can see that in him, and also, to quote like a Wade Kellerism, this time it felt like AEW are in the Hangman Page business.
Yes.
And the presentation, him opening and closing, you know, it's only the second time he's ever done that after Grand Slam Mexico. They just made the point of, we are celebrating, this is our guy, this is our champion. It's not a wishy-washy, it's not like anything else, it's like, this is our guy. And I think that's why, one of the other reasons that you continue the kind of stuff with Moxley. I think you're right, you know, we've got a lot of absences going on at the moment, that sort of thing. You want to get a big TV blow-off. I don't know if it'll be blood and guts, or they're going to do some sort of stip rematch, or whatever they're going to do. The only possible place I can see it doing is where you do at the end of this residency, if you're going to do, or you look at the first week of August in Cleveland, because then they're doing a homecoming show for him in, say the name of the town, because I can't do it.
Roanoke?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I got you, girl.
Thank you. Which is like, it's a couple hours from where he grew up, but it's like 15 minutes from when they run his house show in 2023. So you're doing that, so that maybe looks like a key week. And they always try and do, like, normally this time of year we'd have blood, like last year we had Blood and Guts, and we had the MJF and Ospreay match back to back, the two events. I think they were both late branded as well, and they do that because you need a ratings pick me up in the summer. That's why we've always had like Fight for the Fallen, Fight to Fest, all that sort of stuff. Quake Butter Lake was the one early August, wasn't it, the Jericho Moxley match?
I think the Jericho match, yes.
Yeah, so they're going to continue that, and it does make sense from a Moxley character perspective that they're not going to give up, but you can see his nervousness and the change in his character, the same way that we're getting a change in the Bucks character as well, the same way we've got this change in the Hangman character, you know. So that's kind of important that you kind of continue those lines, because as much as everyone wants it to kind of be the end of everything, it's not the end of everything, it's a chapter. And that's why I'm not against them kind of continuing this program for the short term, and then you go from there. But I get the nervousness about it, and it comes from the last reign, doesn't it? It comes from the last reign where he wasn't. Yeah, absolutely. It's where he wasn't given the focus, he wasn't given the time, and he wasn't really given the opponents. And every time you felt like you wanted to see him wrestle someone new, it didn't happen. You know, he spent very long with Adam Cole, and I'll argue that, you know, the Adam Cole match did very well on that Rampage that was preempted, but it's that thing where you want to see something different from him. We want to see something more because of the investment that people have in this guy, and they want, you know, and you can nurture that. That's why you got the results that you did here. And that's the thing. It's like, if this doesn't go well for any reason, they're not going to look at him and go, oh, he's just a chaser. They're going to look at the booking. So it's like, the impetus is on them. Yeah, exactly. So the impetus is on them in regards to this too. But so I get the nervous. Yeah, I get the nervousness, but I watched that show and I watched the way he was presenting it. I watched that promo and I'm like, my God, this is age different. It's absolutely age different. And it's the same with Toni Storm as well. You look at her presentation on that balcony, and they use the venue perfectly. And a venue that's, you know, what do you think of them going straight to a residency in Chicago after all of...
I think I stand by what I said weeks ago when we talked about this. I think when you look at the time period that they booked these residencies, they did it when it appeared like there was going to be a bigger economic downturn than there has been. I think this was a risk management strategy, and I think this was a smart one. You know, it is summer, like you said. I think I can understand why people are nervous, but I would much rather have a hot, smaller crowd of people who want to be there and some people can't get in than have a giant half-empty building.
I thought the crowd were better than the last time they were in Chicago, to be honest.
Yes, I agree with you on that. They were hot as hell.
Yeah,
hot as hell.
It was
they made
kind
a lot of noise for 1,000 people.
Yeah, look at the reception they got to start. Look at the reception Tony got, and what I felt was also noticeable about the receptions that both of those got was comparing it to Adam Copeland in the middle. and how it kind of felt, his speech felt like a step down, or not phony, but it's just inauthentic, isn't it? I always talk about AEW is its best when it's authentic.
Yes.
And I think we've reached a level of storytelling where then sometimes when that shows up, it kind of feels weird. And I think you could tell that about the reactions to the promo as well, that it just felt different from what you got from, their two top baby faces in the company right now. A couple other small things I want to point out on that one as well is, obviously, the danger with when you have someone like Copeland coming back in and other people coming back in of that kind of age group or experience level is, I think the biggest thing for me is that as they go forward, I don't want to see them come away for this impetus that they've had on the younger talent and bringing people upwards that they've had over this summer, which I think has really kind of helped them to progress number-wise. Because I know there's been this tendency to do just a lot of Death Rider revisionism this week, and we're all talking about the Death Rider's bringing numbers up. But one of the key changes when you look back at that January period that flipped everything around, and the Death Riders actually came after on this because they still continue with the Copeland Christian stuff up to Revolution, was the changeover from these shows filled with kind of older performers that everyone had grown tired of it. The show felt like it was stagnating to this kind of fresh, vibrant show with fresh characters, different type of storytelling, and that authenticity that I go on about so much. And I hope that we don't lose that as we go forward.
It's very important. I think one of the things that I realized, watching All In again, I realized how much Ospreay, Swerve, Hangman, they came across like giant fucking stars. In the arena, they came across in the stadium. They came across like huge fucking stars in the stadium, and I look at that and I'm like, how many guys, non-WWE guys, or like that have AEW been able to do that with? That they managed to do that with these three. That they've sort of peaked this at this moment, and that's where I'm like with you. I'm like, don't lose sight of what got you to this point this spring and summer, which is not having those old guys clogging up your TV time. And I'm not saying you can't use them. I'm not saying they can't be in angles or whatever, but I think you have to, sort of take a stock and be like, what is going to keep these guys fresh, right? And that doesn't mean that Cope can't team up with Christian and they can't have some kind of nostalgia run, but what are you going to do with this that's going to be new and different? How are you going to do the best version of AEW has been really successful with older wrestlers, and how they've been successful with them usually has been teaming them up with younger people or putting them in different situations than they've been in before. They'd be better served by taking a lesson from that than trying to go back to, Cope doing whatever he was doing in WWE that he liked and feels comfortable with. That just is how I'm thinking about that right now. And we'll just have to see. I'm not going to get mad about it in advance. Like you said, there's a bunch of people taking time off, and some of them well-deserved. Mm-hmm. Do it, and then let's see where we're at as we head into Forbidden Door.
Yeah, that's pretty much something that kind of came up with Tony's recent interviews as well, and he's talking about the creative changes that he made at the start of the year.
This was so fascinating. This was an interview that Tony Khan did with the Chicago radio station, is it K100? I want to make sure.
Q101.
Q101,
yep.
Freaking thank you. With Case Lowe, this is his second interview with Tony Khan, and he's done a very good job with these interviews of getting Tony Khan to kind of open up. And I thought this one was really interesting. Not just a lot of people are fixated on the AAA backstabbing stuff that he sort of let out about AAA with the title change with FTR, where they gave her the AAA belts to Dragon Lee, and then Dragon Lee left, and that whole thing. I thought the stuff he had to say about the creative changes and the way he talked about the creative process was so radically different than the way he's discussed other stuff, and some of the stuff I thought was really kind of telling in a way that it made me go back and look at some of the cards from around the time that he's talking about, because I think sometimes with Tony Khan he lets stuff slip when he doesn't mean to, just by giving you specific dates. And for this one, he really called out the fact that they were in Charlotte the first week in January doing Collision. And it was the same day as Wrestle Dynasty and Wrestle Kingdom that he talks about. They didn't have a lot of people there. And the thing I thought was really fascinating was he had a conversation. This is him saying this. I'm quoting him. I had a conversation with a bunch of people. I remember being in Charlotte for Collision the first weekend of this year, and it was the same weekend as Wrestle Dynasty. So a lot of the crew was in Japan. And I remember saying to everybody, I am all over this. I promise, by we'll look back on being here in Charlotte and say we've gotten to such a great place with the company. So I kind of was like, what was happening right around this time? Because to me, that suggests that he had people coming to him and saying stuff sucks, right? Like, I feel like you don't apologize to people and tell them that you're going to do a better job if everyone's like, things are going really well. And that I thought, like, especially coming right after World's End, which I don't think anybody thought was a really good pay-per-view. I don't know. I thought this interview was really interesting.
That was quite a key point, because you can see the change and everything, and there's parts of me where sometimes when we discuss like how they ended up where they were, it all starts there, and I wonder if, because that's the point where they obviously made the decision to flip Paige back face much quicker than they were originally planning to, and move him into the program MJF, move Jeff Jarrett off. But then also, like, I find the mention of Wrestle Dynasty fascinating, because such a key part of this is Kenny Omega coming back in, the Bucks coming back in as they did in April as well. And did you look at the presentation of some of the people that you had there and wonder why New Japan were able to present them stronger than you were? And that always sits in the back of my mind as well, and you realise that you needed to change. But I thought it was a very, very fascinating interview. There's also some interesting bits around kind of picking up of CMLL talent. And straight afterwards, we got the kind of Lucha Bros kind of confirming that Edgy Sarah looks like he's on a dual contract, and we've talked plenty in the past about the implications of that and the good and the bad points, and we'll see how that relationship grows. But it was always something that was going to come into focus with what was happening with WWE's purchase of AAA and what's happened previously in Japan. And that was also brought up, and then he also kind of spoke around a number of other things. So if you get a chance, please go and listen to that interview. But yeah, it's keeping that impetus, keeping that kind of mindset, and keeping those plans to move forward and not being dragged back into kind of thinking in that differently. And the political landscape's changed a little bit as well, because you've got much stronger characters now. Tony Storm is going to be able to command pretty decent political capital now at this point. In the same way that Mercedes can. And this is not this, please don't do the whole, this person has creative control because I can't be fucking bothered with that argument, and that's why we completely avoided it, because it's just fucking stupid.
Stupid.
But it is. But you've also got this thing on the male side where we started this year with a political capital kind of control point of Chris Jericho, Adam Copeland, and Jon Moxley. And at this point in the year now, we're now seeing this kind of not an alliance, but this kind of political kind of capital move to this younger kind of trio of Adam Page, Swerve Strickland, and Will Ospreay. And because of the way that they do things differently, how much influence will that have on the show going forward? And then you have obviously Max just kind of floats around and goes wherever it feels works best for him, I guess.
Suits him,
Yeah, exactly, right? But he knows, obviously, like, he will attach himself to these horses in a way, and we've seen him do that over the last couple of years too. So
we've seen it over the last few weeks. We had the reiteration of the whole, like, we only want people here who want to be here, which is him picking up talking points from other people's interviews.
Yeah, so that's what he does. But it's interesting. So we've seen this kind of power dynamic change, and I think that plays a part in influence in terms of the direction of the company too, because we've seen that predominantly across the last few years. So, and that's one of the most interesting things about having Tony and Paige at the top and being treated like they're at the top, is how will that influence the programming now going forward in terms of their style and their presentation and their way of storytelling, because we've seen a defined change every time we've had someone different at the top. But yeah, so those are the kind of things that we want to talk about going out. But what I want to kind of end on discussion of all this, and we ended up just getting to a real show review, but I think we discussed so many important points that it was worth doing. But I asked the question before this show, I wanted to see what an AEW show would feel like, because I felt like the previous All-Ins were very much kind of a WrestleMania feel. Yes. From the people involved, to the match structures, to the presentation, all of it. And this one was an AEW show, because this one in its truest sense was something for everybody. It wasn't just, you have the big triumph kind of main event and all that sort of thing and the death match element, but you also had this incredible technical women's match, with people fully invested in those characters. And then you had your nostalgia New Japan match, but you also had a different type of storytelling in that. And then you had your PWG inspired kind of tag team match, all high energy with huge stakes in the middle as well. So you had something that appeals to every different type of the fan base in a way that I don't think these big shows have ever been able to manage before. And then everything else that's thrown around it that felt like their own flair. Last year we were told that you couldn't put a death match in a stadium.
Yep, repeatedly. And as though we were children.
Yeah, so we were told this, and yet they did, and it was one of the best moments in their history, and it was AEW. And sometimes I think, you know, when they look at this moment and everyone wants to compare everything to everybody else, and I think about how do they compare to themselves? How do they make something that's memorable that people say, oh, do you remember this in AEW? And it's shows like this and it's matches like that. Not just a death match, but, you know, the four that we've talked about. Those are the things that do it. And that's what will make people come back to future All-Ins in the US and build that brand of that kind of big show. Whether you want the big show a year branding or not, but it's that sort will make that work going forward as in terms of a destination, in terms of something that people want to be part of. And that's why I felt like this show was really, really important, not just for right now, not just for the fact it feels like the fan base is unified for the first time since 2022, you know, especially considering how they had the fan base try to turn on each other in 2023, like purposely. So not just for recovering that damage and kind of closing that circle, but in terms of what it can do for them going forward.
Yeah.
All right. I was expecting.
No, I agree with you. I'm glad you came back to that because I was actually at one point earlier going to ask you when we were talking about the look of the show. I was like, I should ask Trish if she agrees with what she thinks because she said that last time. So I'm glad you came back to it. I think that it's very telling and very important to remember for AEW to remember that the most successful stuff on the show was the stuff that they came up with themselves. That wasn't created elsewhere or, you know, brought in from someplace else or imported wholesale from another promotion. It was their younger talent doing their storytelling the way they want to do it. And that was what was successful. And that was what got people both physically there, willing to spend money, and emotionally invested to the point where people are still talking about it a week and a half later.
Absolutely. One little silly question before we sign off. If you could think of one silly little thing that happened in that kind of weekend on that day that will make you remember the show outside of like the standard things, what would it be?
Outside of, oh God,
I should have put that one in the docket, really.
I know. Give me some time to think about it. I gotta tell you, stupidly, this is a thing that's probably going to stay with me for a long time. I was coming back from the bathroom and I ran into James from ONR in the concourse, and he hadn't seen, we had seen some of the other folks, but we hadn't seen the girls. And I said, oh, we're sitting in this section. And he was like, oh, and I said, well, let me walk you over there, but then I'm going to go get a soda. And he had a Coke Zero in his hand and he said, take this one. And I was just like, that was just one of those, it just perfectly encapsulates to me what that feeling was like of meeting up with everybody from Social Suplex and just being in that community was just take this Coke. Why would you go get another one? Here's one I have that you can have. And I don't know. It was the best. It just was, yeah.
No, I love stuff like that because, you know, this is why I go on about the live experience so much, is that sometimes it's not just about what you're watching. It's about who you're experiencing things with and the people that you meet through this. And I always say that it's such a fundamental reason why I enjoy wrestling and why I'm so grateful for it. It's not just for what we watch, but it is the people that we meet. And it's everything that happens with those and how the community builds out of that. And how you can see people come out from their, you know, out of their shell. People who might not be so confident in their real life, but can find like this second string, kind of this second wind in confidence-wise in that environment. And I just think it's so important and it's such a critical part in enjoying it for me. So it's definitely...
What about you?
What about me?
What's your moment?
Oh, I got... I don't know. There's so many little things, I think. But something I just like is just walking around and feeling the energy. Yeah. I love the feeling of an energy of something like that. And there's just nothing like it, and the anticipation and all that sort of thing. And, you know, I like to walk ballparks because stuff like that.
Yes.
We've been through this. But that's something that's just really special in that moment. And because we get so worked up about all the different little things. We get so worked up about, you know, the way things are going, stories, numbers, and everything like that. But that's that thing personally where you talk about time, you chase it. Like, you can't replace it. You can't imitate it. You can't just talk about it. It's something that you feel, and I always gravitate towards those sort of things. So just that thing where I always get that thing when you walk in the door and you see like everything, and I'm just like, that's it. This is where we're at. This is it. And you get that kind of rush of emotion, And I will probably chase that for the rest of my life, I'm sure, because I love it. And it reminds me why we all love this so much. Okay. That's emotional for me. Let's not do any more.
It's extremely emotional for you. I'm a little bit nervous right now. I feel like we should break
God.
this down. We've got to quickly go to a finish.
Okay. Well, let's do that then.
I loved seeing, seriously though, Trish, I loved seeing you enjoy this. I know how disappointing Forbidden Door last year was for you when we were together and like the outcome as a show. And so seeing this and meeting up with you afterwards and just the giant smile on your face that basically was there the rest of the night. Like every time I looked over in the corner where you were sitting, I was like, oh, Trish is still happy.
It just made me sound like a completely miserable bitch then.
Oh, God, you're not a miserable bitch. Jesus, God.
Can be.
Look at her. She's still smiling. The match beater is still happy.
Oh, yeah, it was so much. That bit after was so much fun. It was awesome. So, yeah, I don't mind wasting a couple minutes talking about that because it was just, it was so good. And it was, yeah, I just find that stuff so, it's the same as after Wrestle Dynasty in January, like some of my favourite moments ever, like it's just, yeah, means a lot to me. So thank you everyone for that. That was much appreciated. Yeah, let's do the close because I've got far too emotional now and we're not allowed to do that. Producer Leah's going to shout at us for going over because I'm being emotional.
Now she's going to get upset because she's been maligned because she just assured us in the chat that we could go over 2 hours. So I have to defend Producer Leah, who said in the chat, you're fine to go late, but you are at 2 hours. So there you go. I have to create a defense for my buddy.
That's just retribution for being mauled, actually. I'm just going to count as that. Yeah. But there we are. Or the Randy Orton age debate.
Randy Orton debate.
What the hell was that about? I don't know. That's funny.
Your face was so beautiful during all of that.
I'm just like, was he? It's like I always thought he was like a gay pin-up in the 2000s. I don't know. Was he actually a trans woman? Oh, there we go. Right. Anyway. Right. We lost it now. This is because I got emotional and now I'm trying to cover for it, so I'm getting hyper and this is what we're doing. So, this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. Episode 45? 45.
Episode 40-fucking-5, girl.
Jesus Christ. Not only on 50. That's scary.
I can't. 50 is going to be, Jesus God.
Okay. Let me do my close before I fuck it up like I normally do. So let's just do that. We are produced by the wonderful Leah of Tunnel Talk, who did give us some extra time today. Thank you, Leah. You can find Tunnel Talk every Sunday, going through the best in character work, storylines, and anything else in AEW, including the outfits of the Young Bucks on a weekly basis. Leah's laughing at me now, so I told you. You can find them on all your favourite podcast providers and on Red Circle, as well as all the other podcasts on the Social Suplex Network. You can also visit us at socialsuplex.com to view our Social Suplex newsletter, which is out every 2 weeks. New edition's actually out today, same day as this podcast. And please read all the incredible work that's done by our team there on so many promotions around the world, probably the most in-depth coverage that you'll find in one place anywhere. Very proud of what the team are putting together there. You can support us through Chopped Tees at www.chopped-tees.com. Dash.
Yep, thank you.
/ Trish and Sarah. And you can also find us on the Social Suplex Discord. Come and speak to all the hosts of all our podcasts on the network, as well as other wrestling fans. And you can listen to Doc's apology, because he's apologised for being wrong about the Paige Moxley result, with a very nice long YouTube thing, putting far more effort than I did when I was just like, change your fucking name. You can also find us. You can find us on Twitter at Trish and Sarah. You can find us under our own names on Blue Sky. You can even find a Social Suplex newsletter on Tumblr now. We're expanding. And you can also email us at trishandsarah@gmail.com, trishandsarah@gmail.com with any questions, queries, or anything else feedback-wise that you may so desire. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Obviously, there's a lot going on because that will be just around SummerSlam weekend. We've got the G1 in action, 5-Star Grand Prix starting up. We've got Noah title changes, which we'll talk about next time once I've managed to actually stomach them. And they were good. I just can't get my head around it yet, but I want some time to do it. I can kind of see where it's going, but I'd like to see a bit more. So we've got plenty to talk about then, but we just wanted to focus on All In and developments with AEW for this one. So until then, I've been Trish.
I have been Sarah.
And we thank you for listening to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're crushing morning miles or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.